Chapter 10-19. Daniel stared blankly at Lu Yin's departing figure, not knowing what to do. Force this person to stay? Putting aside whether or not he could stay, Master Yuan wasn't far away and could arrive in the blink of an eye. But if this person was allowed to leave, who would compensate the Dark Phoenix tribe for their losses? While Daniel was pondering this, Lu Yin was already nowhere to be seen. Someone couldn't help but remind him, "Chief, he's running away." "Shut up." Daniel Phineas barked, startling the person. Zephyrus smiled bitterly. In this situation it was better for Lu Yin to leave than to stay. As for the tribe's losses, he would have to bear them himself. What they did not know was that if not for the possibility of a fire dragon emerging from the Heaven Fire Stone, Lu Yin would have already absorbed all 16 layers of black flames. At that time they would have to meet even if they did not want to. Although Lu Yin had not absorbed all of the black flames, it did not matter. The black flames would not be able to escape, and once the heat from the Heaven Fire Stone was depleted, he could come back again. The Dark Phoenix tribe's black flames reminded him of the Phoenix family. If the Dark Phoenix tribe had such terrifying flames, then the Phoenix family and the Blaze realm would only be stronger. They were all treasures. Absorbing the Dark Phoenix tribe's black flames was a pleasant surprise, and Lu Yin left the Dark Phoenix tribe's territory with a sense of exhilaration. He looked back and saw that no one was chasing him, so he sped up and left. His trip this time was exceptionally smooth, and Lu Yin used his special privileges to return to Frostwave Weave via the military express route. The entire trip took less than 10 days. When he saw Xianxia, he felt a sense of familiarity. Although they had only been apart for half a year, the near-death experience felt like an eternity. News of Lu Yin's return quickly spread, and the entire Frostwave Weave was in an uproar once again. The various weaves of the Great Eastern Alliance sent their congratulations, and many people wanted to inquire about the situation in the Innerverse, but Lu Yin rejected them all with the excuse that he was recovering from his injuries. After returning to Xianxia, the first thing Lu Yin did was toss the remains of the giant mechanical monster that had attacked Hui Kong from the Technocracy to the 12th Imperial Squadron so that they could study the materials. The 12th Imperial Squadron also gave Lu Yin a pleasant surprise: 3,000 androids. These androids were created from blueprints that Lu Yin had obtained from his die. Each android had the power of an explorer, and they had played a huge role during the war. However, there had only been a few hundred of them back then, and each one only had the power level of an explorer. Now there were 3,000 enhanced androids in front of Lu Yin. Although their power levels were still at the explorer realm, they were already very close to that of a cruiser. As for their defensive capabilities, they were already comparable to a cruiser's. 3,000 cruiser-level androids were enough to shock the Outerverse. Back then, more than half of the captains of the Great Yu Empire's 13 Imperial squadrons had only been cruisers, which showed just how shocking 3,000 androids were to the outside world. That was not all. Banjio had found quite a number of rare materials within the Great Eastern Alliance and was thinking of ways to synthesize them. Once he succeeded, the androids would be upgraded once again. The benefits of unifying half of the Outerverse were apparent, as there were all sorts of materials available. Lu Yin's King Zishan Palace had also been remodeled, and all of the secret rooms had been constructed with the toughest materials that could withstand a hunter's attack. There was even a lock-breaking room that had been specially prepared, and it had been constructed with spiritual thread. As the leading power of the Great Eastern Alliance, the Great Yu Empire was the leading power in both its economy and military. In the past, the Great Yu Empire had still needed the support of the Nalan family and the other major corporations to support its economy, but now, Xianxia alone was enough to support the Great Yu Empire's economy. There was also the street where the mainland's auction house was located. Every inch of land had been worth thousands of times or even tens of thousands of times, and many financial groups had been squeezed out. Now all of them were large financial groups that could move unhindered through weaves, and almost all of them were large financial groups that could move unhindered through dozens of weaves. Even some of the financial groups that had crossed weaves could not support the auction house, as they were not qualified to enter. Although the mainland's auction house had not been able to provide Lu Yin with any high-quality goods over the past half a year, with its current reputation, it had received many rare treasures that were enough to support the tri-monthly auction of high-quality goods. This had also brought Lu Yin quite a bit of money, but Lu Yin did not care about this money as he had invested it all into the newly established mainland charity. The outside world has been saying that I've died, but there hasn't been any chaos in the Empire? Lu Yin asked curiously. Across from him were Wei Rong, Enya, Huansha, Gavin, Hil Anna and the others. Hil Anna was the Foreign Affairs Minister and he was also a member of the cabinet. He was the first to speak. The Hall of Honor guaranteed that regardless of whether or not anything happened to Your Highness, the Great Yu Empire would be guaranteed 1,000 years of peace. Lu Yin understood. 1,000 years of peace was enough to make many corporations green with envy. This meant that this was another myriad city and it was even an enhanced version of it. Your Highness, there's something that I feel should be put on the agenda, Gavin said with a solemn expression. The Great Yu Empire cannot only have a royal regent. When he said this, the crowd was moved, but they were not surprised. In reality, Lu Yin's status had already been discussed by countless people in the Empire. If the Great Yu Empire had still been the Great Yu Empire of the past, then there would have been no problem. However, Lu Yin was now the Great Eastern Alliance leader and the commander of the Outerverse allied armies. Any one of these statuses surpassed that of the Great Yu Empire's emperor. However, he had yet to ascend to the throne, which caused many people to discuss this matter, especially within the Great Eastern Alliance. Wendy Yushan was also under a great deal of pressure. She had no desire for power, but everyone was pointing fingers at her. Aside from her, there was no one else more qualified than Lu Yin to inherit the throne. Lu Yin muttered to himself as he himself had forgotten about this matter. Ever since he had become the Great Eastern Alliance leader, the position of Emperor of the Great Yu Empire no longer held any appeal to him. However, he had not considered the troubles that his current status might bring him. Let's put this matter on hold for a while, Lu Yin said. Gavin wanted to say something else, but he was stopped by Hil Anna. Wei Rong spoke up. Your Highness, during the 7 months that you were gone, the Empire's infiltration of the Western Weaves has sped up significantly. After your return, several weaves in the Central Weaves have been willing to join the Great Eastern Alliance. Lu Yin nodded. Discuss this matter with Wang Wen and Enya. You know what to do with those who refuse to join the alliance. The title of commander of the Outerverse allied armies cannot go to waste. Wei Rong smiled. Understood. Your Highness, the Nalan family sent news yesterday. The Great Yu Empire, the even larger Great Eastern Alliance and the even larger Outerverse. There were many things that Lu Yin had to deal with and there were many things that only he could handle. He had no choice but to delegate his authority time and time again. Gavin and the others only left when the sky darkened. After they left, Wendy Yushan arrived. Lu Yin felt as if a lifetime had passed as he looked at Wendy Yushan. I almost died. I thought that I would never see you again. Wendy Yushan's gaze turned cold. What happened? Lu Yin would not say much to anyone else, but he had said a lot to Wendy Yushan. There were some things that needed to be vented. Wendy Yushan's gaze turned cold. Night King Zhenwu, this person is not easy to deal with. I know, and I won't be impulsive. We've already fought once and I won't lose the next time we meet. Lu Yin was confident. Wendy Yushan muttered, the Dao Source sect is in ruins. There are more people now. It's normal for the 6th mainland to retreat. Don't go there for the time being. You might have been recognized after that battle in the astral graveyard. Not long after Wendy Yushan left. Lu Yin muttered to himself for a moment before opening his gadget. A person appeared on his screen. Wang Wen. Your Highness chess piece, long time no see. Wang Wen smiled happily. Lu Yin's expression turned serious. I'm going to deal with the Day-Night clan. Wang Wen's expression changed. What did you say? Say it again. Lu Yin spoke in a low voice. I'm going to deal with the Day-Night clan. Help me think of a way. Wang Wen's eyes lit up and his lips unconsciously curled upwards. He could not suppress the excitement in his heart, or rather his desire to fight. Interesting. I guess that after unifying the Outerverse, you would target the Innerverse large clans. I originally thought that it would be the Blaze Realm or the Ross Empire, but I didn't expect it to be the Day-Night clan. Chess piece bro, your appetite is too big. Can you do it? Lu Yin asked seriously. Wang Wen asked, is there a way to deal with a powerhouse with a power level of 1,000,000? Yes, Lu Yin replied. Is there a way to deal with tens of thousands, millions or even tens of millions of Day-Night soldiers? Yes. Is there a way to erase the Day-Night clan's influence in the Hall of Honor? Yes. Is there a way to delay the reinforcements from the Day-Night clan's allies? Yes. Then one last question. Wang Wen's expression was unprecedentedly serious. Do you have the determination to defeat Night King Zhenwu? Lu Yin's gaze turned cold and his lips cracked into a smile. Of course I do. Wang Wen laughed. Alright, then let's play a game of chess. Our opponent is the Day-Night clan. A chess piece inexplicably appeared in his hand, and he viciously smashed it onto the table, shattering it. Lu Yin clenched his fist and the void trembled like a war drum. From this moment on, he would treat the Day-Night clan as his mortal enemy. He would use the entire Outerverse power to destroy the Day-Night clan and Night King Zhenwu. In a secret room in King Zishan's palace, Lu Yin looked around. This place had clearly been modified and the walls were sturdier than before. It was said that they could even block a hunter's attack. Although that was a bit exaggerated, it should be able to prevent the shockwaves from cultivation from spreading. Aside from the walls being modified, nothing else had changed. Lu Yin swept out with his domain and then sat down. He raised his hand and his die appeared. It was time to upgrade his external items. There were many things that he needed to do at the moment, and upgrading his external items was a small matter. He had already replenished his stock of Heaven Fire stones, and using them to cultivate was the most important thing for him to do. He also needed to enter the Daoist sect's ruins and absorb the second cauldron qi. Lu Yin's spiritual force was very strong, but he had never learned how to use it. The Day-Night Fist was the only technique that could use spiritual force to attack, but it was still too crude. Lu Yin hoped that he could use the Day-Night clan's ancient stone to obtain an attack technique similar to the Night King's heaven-splitting technique, which would definitely increase his power level. He had to take things one step at a time and he had to upgrade his external items first. He tapped the die, causing it to spin before finally stopping. Pips 1 was a common sight as it was the most common roll. A medicinal herb fell down in front of him and it emitted a fluorescent light. Lu Yin carefully examined it, but he discovered that it was just an ordinary herb. He was a little disappointed, but he recovered his die and tapped it again. This time his luck was better and he rolled pips. Chapter 10:20. Looking at the 2 layers of light, Lu Yin tossed the giant's right arm over. The giant's right arm had in lighter rune lines, and when it was worn on the arm, it was equivalent to the wrist guard that Lu Yin had worn earlier. The wrist guards were limited by the materials they were made of, and even if they were upgraded to the maximum, they would only be able to increase the user's strength by a power level close to 300,000. However, the giant's right arm was different. Lu Yin continued to toss star essence into the giant's right arm, and the arm was upgraded once, twice, thrice, and then 6 times before it could no longer be upgraded. It was also limited by the materials available to it and it had reached its limit. Lu Yin sucked in a breath of cold air as he looked at the giant's right arm, which had been upgraded 6 times. The number of rune lines on the giant's right arm was enormous, and it far surpassed any enlighter that Lu Yin had ever seen, including Shamrock Enterprises' Yu Mu and the other top experts. The giant's right arm should be infinitely close to the level of an envoy. Lu Yin touched the giant's right arm and took a deep breath. The inner verse and outer verse had been separated from each other for more than 6 years. Back then he had been able to upgrade his foreign objects to the point where they could threaten an enlighter, but now they were almost at the level of an emissary. He himself had also evolved. Though it was earning money. But that didn't seem right. With Lu Yin's abilities back then, even if he had a lot of money, he would still be limited by the amount of materials he could use. At most he would only be able to threaten enlighters. He was still on a different level. After sighing to himself, he put away the giant's right arm and took out the smothering cannon. This thing was very useful for sneak attacks. It was small and inconspicuous, but it was also very powerful. Smothering cannon's power was only equivalent to that of a cruiser with a power level of 50,000, which was actually quite good compared to the Outerverse. After all, it was stored in the Hall of Honor's border warehouse. However, it was still of little use to Lu Yin. He tossed all of the smothering cannons onto the upper screen and began to frantically increase his strength. After upgrading it 9 times, it could not be upgraded anymore. It was also limited by the materials used. After 9 upgrades, Smothering Pow's rune lines had reached the level of an enlighter with a power level of over 200,000. Although their power level was low, there were still many of them. Furthermore, Lu Yin was only a cruiser and these cannons could threaten an enlighter. They were basically the same as the gun that he had upgraded in the beginning, which was pretty good. The giant's right arm had been upgraded 6 times, and it had cost a total of 1.3 million star essence. The smothering cannon had been upgraded 9 times, and there were more than 20 of them, which had cost a total of 1.4 million star essence. Combined, the 2 upgrades had cost a total of 2.7 million star essence. If he hadn't made a fortune, he wouldn't have had the money to upgrade himself. With that in mind, he took out the one-sided mirror. This was the next step. This thing could forcibly absorb star energy within a certain range, and if used properly, it could disrupt an opponent's battle techniques, or even innate gifts. The single-sided mirror's rune lines were about the same as muffled cannons, which was also close to 50,000 cruisers' rune lines. However, its materials were much better than muffled cannons as it was still a power vessel. Lu Yin continued to level up until he could no longer do so after the 13th attempt. 13 uses had consumed a total of 1.18 million star essence. By now, the number of rune lines on the single-sided mirror was enormous, and it should have surpassed the level of Yumu. Maybe it was more than 400,000 combat power. These 3 items had cost Lu Yin nearly 4 million star essence to upgrade them, which was a huge waste of money. The further he progressed, the more precious the items he would come into contact with, and the more money he would need to upgrade them. He was still poor after all. He looked at his cosmic ring and saw that he still had more than 20 million star essence, which was enough for the time being. Actually, to Lu Yin, the most important thing was still his universal armor, or rather, a piece of equipment that could protect him from all directions. The giant's arm could barely be considered an option since it was huge, and if used properly, it could protect his entire body. However, he still needed something similar to the universal armor. His new set of universal armor could at most withstand an attack from an enlighter with a power level of around 200,000, which was enough in the outerverse. However, in the innerverse, especially when facing the Day-Night clan, it definitely wouldn't be enough. He hoped that Banju would be able to integrate some powerful materials. Lu Yin suddenly slapped his head as he had forgotten that he had given the mechanical monsters that had attacked Huikong to Banjo. Even if Banjo could identify the materials of the mechanical monsters, he didn't have the ability to separate them. Those monsters seemed weak and had been easily destroyed by Huikong, but that was Huikong in existence with a power level of at least 1 million. No matter how weak those mechanical monsters were, they should still be stronger than envoys. Lu Yin walked out of the secret room and headed towards the research facility. At this moment, within the 12th Squadron's underground research facility, Banjo was vexed. His vice-captain, Xianxia, was standing behind him, looking at the remains of the mechanical monsters that had occupied the entire underground. "Captain, was this sent by His Highness?" Xianxia asked. Banjo nodded. Xianxia was helpless. "With our current technology, it's impossible to move these things. We can't even break down a single part. I don't know where His Highness got these things from." Banjo looked at the broken pieces of the mechanical monsters and touched the mechanical parts. These came from the technocracy. The rest of the people were shocked. The technocracy was a civilization that humans could never come into contact with. Although they were constantly at war, not many people truly understood the technocracy, and no one had ever ventured deep into it. His Highness was actually able to bring such a huge item from the technocracy. "It's amazing," an old scientist exclaimed. "His Highness can't do anything, but we're too weak and can't keep up. With our technocracy's ability, we can't do anything to these things. I reckon that even the outerverse's most technologically advanced future weave won't be able to do anything to them." Banjo grew irritated as he listened to the discussions. "Alright, you guys can leave now. I'll think of something." Not long after, the crowd dispersed, leaving only Banjo and Xianxia behind. "Captain," Xianxia called out, but the void tore open and Lu Yin walked out. When he saw Lu Yin appear, Xianxia's face paled. "Greetings, Your Highness." During Earth's trial, Xianxia had advocated helping Raz, the son of Sikar, deal with Lu Yin. Although many years had passed since then, Xianxia still felt unconsciously fearful whenever he saw Lu Yin. He was afraid that Lu Yin would seek revenge. Lu Yin had never cared about Xianxia. Banjo bowed when he saw Lu Yin arrive. "Greetings, Your Highness." Lu Yin looked at the broken pieces of the mechanical monster. How is it? Any ideas? Banjo had Shalosh leave, his expression solemn. Your Highness, we can't disassemble these mechanical creatures, and we can't even analyze their material properties. Lu Yin wasn't surprised. If I can disassemble these machines, can you use the materials? Banjo's eyes lit up. We can use some of them, but most of them need to be melted and we don't have enough high-temperature flames. Lu Yin replied, I have high-temperature flames, but I need a brand new set of armor with the best materials. I'll be your assistant. Whatever metal you need to melt, just leave it to me. Banjo nodded. Understood, I'll definitely make the best armor. Lu Yin left with the broken pieces of the mechanical monster and went straight to the barren planet. He looked up and saw his die appear. He tapped it and it was one again. There was no rush, let's try again. The die slowly stopped spinning and in the end it showed 4 pips. Time stop. There was no rush once he entered the time stop space. Pips 1, 5 and 6 were useless here, but pips 2 and 3 were still useful. Perhaps he had used up all his luck from rolling 3 pips. But he had only rolled 2 pips after a month and a half in the time stop space. Pips 2 allowed him to disassemble things. The disassembly vortex could only exist for 5 minutes, but he could use star crystals to increase its duration. He dragged the broken pieces of the mechanical monster and tossed them into the vortex. All sorts of strange metals fell out of the vortex and Lu Yin picked them up and continued disassembling them. He knew that these metals were probably synthesized, and even Banjo and the others couldn't do it with their current technology. The scene in front of him changed and he returned to the barren planet. With a single step he returned to Xenu Star's underground technology institute. He tossed the countless strange materials he had disassembled to Banjo and then left under the latter's shocked and confused gaze. Banjo wanted to create new equipment so he needed to research these metals. This required time. But Lu Yin could use this time to cultivate and explore the Daoist clan's inheritance stones. In a secret room in King Zishan's palace, Lu Yin took out the 16 Daoist clan's ancient inheritance stones with a complicated expression. During Earth's trial he, Xia Luo and Lulu had all obtained battle techniques from the ancient stones. Logically speaking, only people from the Daoist clan should have been able to obtain them, but he hadn't thought too much about it. Now that he thought about it, Lulu was from the Mavis family, so it wasn't surprising that she had some mysterious methods. But who was Xia Luo? Primeval surnames weren't simple, and those who dared to use them were even more so. Also, as a Mavis, why had Lulu come to Earth? He had once thought that it was for the Undying Manual, but now that he thought about it, that might not be the case. Was Earth hiding some unknown secret related to the Hidden Earth Society? He still had to visit Jupiter once he broke through to the Hunter realm. Lu Yin held the ancient inheritance stone in his hand and felt the vicissitudes of time. He raised his hand and the stone floated into the air. He then cut his finger and dripped a drop of blood onto the stone. In an instant, a dark sky appeared before his eyes. Black and white suddenly intersected to form a giant fist that descended. It was exactly the same as the first time he had entered the ancient inheritance stone. Zhou Xian, Wuxia, Jenny Anna, and the rest had all failed at that moment and had been unable to enter the inheritance corridor. At that time, Lu Yin had needed to rely on the serious art to enter. Now his body trembled slightly, and the Daoist fist disappeared as his body appeared outside the corridor. At the same time in the Daoist clan's ancestral grounds, countless Daoist clan members looked up at the stone tablet that pierced through the sky. Some were excited, some were expectant, and some were disdainful. The stone tablet represented the level of comprehension that everyone in the Daoist clan had gained from the inheritance stone. The higher one's comprehension, the higher their image would appear on the tablet. The highest image was undoubtedly Night King Zhenwu, and second only to him was Zhanlong Daoist. The image displayed by the stone tablet didn't depend on one's cultivation base. Instead, it only looked at one's comprehension of battle techniques and the level of inheritance one had received. At this moment, many Daoist clan members were competing on the stone tablet, including Tiankong Daoist, Qilian Daoist, and Rou Daoist who had studied in the Astral Combat Academy. There were also Hui Daoist, Zhou Daoist, Night Queen Yanqing, Night King Gu, and many others who had studied in Astral 10. Chapter 1021. Night King Zhenwu had decreed that anyone who could surpass Zhanlong Day Night and become an inheritor who was second only to him would be able to follow him to the Neoverse and witness the moment he became one of the 5 astral children. The 5 astral children were the titles of the top youths in the Neoverse. It had been passed down since ancient times, and no one from the Innerverse or Outerverse had ever obtained it. It was a way to witness history and leave one's name in the Day-Night clan's history. Countless people wanted to fight for this honor. There were 3 Day-Night clan inheritance stones. One had been taken away by Night King Zhenwu, and the other was revolving around the stone tablet. Zhou Day-Night and the others were all around the stone tablet, accepting the inheritance and vying for the position of honor that was second only to Night King Zhenwu. Below the stone tablet there were several almost petrified figures. They were the Day-Night clan's elders who were in charge of guarding the ancestral land. Is Night King Zhenwu still unwilling to return the inheritance stones? One of the figures asked. As he spoke, the air trembled and dust fell from his body. No one knew how many years he had been sitting here. Even though the 6th mainland had swept through the Innerverse and invaded the Day-Night flow zone, these ancient figures had not left. They would rather die than leave the ancestral land. Fortunately, the 6th mainland had not found the Day-Night clan's ancestral land. The 6th mainland invaded and the 3 inheritance stones were taken away separately. 2 have already been returned and only Night King Zhenwu's stone remains. Do we need to hurry him? Another figure asked. The figure in the middle closed his eyes. There's no need to rush him. This child represents the future of our Day-Night clan. If he wants to take away the inheritance stone, then give it to him. The 5 astral children are a great honor. There's a chance for him to become a progenitor under the heavenly change. I hope that he'll be the first progenitor of our Day-Night clan. Not far away, Zhou Day-Night sat below the stone tablet with a frown. She had been here for a long time. Night Queen Yanqing was also nearby, along with many other Day-Night clan members. Night King Zhenwu had ordered everyone to do their best to fight for the inheritance stones. In the distance, Night King Zhenwu smiled as he looked at the stone tablet with sparkling eyes. Fight for it. He liked to let others fight for it. If he did not fight for it, how could he show his respect? The position that was second only to him was already an unreachable existence to these people, but that position was destined to belong to that woman, as only she had the qualifications to be second only to him. The Day-Night clan had countless clansmen who could roam the Innerverse and Outerverse without fear of anyone. He was the ruler of the Day-Night clan, the ruler of the Night King clan. The corridor was still deathly silent. Taking a step back would lead to endless darkness. There was obviously no light, but the entire corridor was clearly visible. Lu Yin looked to the side and saw that there were many names carved into the stone slab. Night King Zhenwu's name was at the very top. 11 years ago, Lu Yin had also seen this name at this location. When he had seen this name, he had felt as if he had seen the scene of Night King Zhenwu standing tall in the heavens. Night King Zhenwu had been so valiant, so insufferably arrogant and so invincible. Now Night King Zhenwu had become even stronger, but he no longer gave Lu Yin that same feeling. Second only to Night King Zhenwu was Zhanlong Day Night. The Day-Night restoration technique was one of the Day-Night clan's unique techniques. Although it was not at the level of being able to intimidate an entire era, it was not too far off. Throughout the entire history of the Day-Night clan, there were very few people who had cultivated this technique. After successfully cultivating it, Zhanlong Day Night could easily crush countless people, and he was second only to Night King Zhenwu. Lu Yin didn't look any further and stepped into the corridor. When he had first stepped into the corridor, he had only taken a single step before he had been kicked out. At that time, he had felt an indescribable pressure and his entire body had been suppressed. At the time, he had not known that it was a spiritual force suppression. The Day-Night clan's battle techniques contained spiritual force attacks, and his spiritual force was not enough to enter the corridor. Thus, he had only been able to take a single step. But now, the spiritual force suppression was like a gentle breeze, and it did not affect him at all. Lu Yin directly entered the corridor and walked forward step by step. In the Day-Night clan's ancestral grounds, Lu Yin's image quietly appeared at the bottom of the stone tablet. No one noticed him and everyone was looking at the top of the stone tablet. There, Night Queen Yanqing, Zhou Day Night and several other powerhouses from the Night King clan were competing fiercely, and they were all rushing to the top. In terms of innate talent, Zhou Day-Night could not compare to Night Queen Yanqing. When Lu Yin had first met her, she had needed to rely on the White Void Sword to display her domain. At that time, Night Queen Yanqing had already been the leader of Astral 3 and had comprehended both the Night King's body and battle force. She could easily crush Zhou Day-Night. Zhou Day-Night had been valued because of the Night's End, Daybreak. Night King Zhenwu had made it extremely difficult for her to surpass everyone else in the competition for the inheritance. However, comprehending the Night's End, Daybreak seemed to have unlocked Zhou Day-Night's innate talent, allowing her to advance by leaps and bounds. Otherwise, she would not have been qualified to compete with Night Queen Yanqing. A Day-Night clan member spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted. Several clan members around him calmly stepped forward and carried him away. Inheritances were not something that could be obtained by just sitting there and watching. One had to fight for it and one had to act according to one's abilities. Many people tried to obtain inheritances that they could not handle, and it was normal for them to be severely injured or even killed. This was how the Day-Night clan competed, and it was the same for many other great clans in the universe. No one would place an inheritance in front of them, and they would have to fight for it if they wanted to obtain it. Night Queen Yanqing's image had already reached the top of the stone tablet. Over the years of war, everyone had improved, and all of that had been transformed into a foundation of comprehension. Everyone had improved, and the higher one's innate talent, the more obvious the improvement would be. Night Queen Yanqing opened her eyes and looked at the top of the stone tablet. She discovered that she had not surpassed Zhanlong Day-Night, and her gaze turned cold. She looked around and saw Zhou Day-Night and the others. She snorted and continued to comprehend. Zhou Day-Night's face was pale as she had only entered the top 20. Although she was at the top of the stone tablet, there was still a considerable distance between her and Zhanlong Day-Night. She would not be able to replace him in a short period of time. As she thought about it, a trace of blood seeped out from the corner of her mouth. She had long since reached her limit, but she had persevered. For the sake of her clan, for the sake of that person, and for the sake of becoming that person's wife. Many members of the Day-Night clan were anxious, and they urged Zhanlong Day-Night to return in order to prevent his position from being replaced. A Day-Night clan member dared to brazenly insult the Night King clan because of their status on the stone tablet. Status represented potential, and many of the older generation members of the Day-Night clan valued Zhanlong Day-Night. If Zhanlong Day-Night's status was replaced, then Lu Yin would be in deep trouble. There were many in the Night King clan who wanted him dead. Far away, Night King Zhenwu stood quietly as Star Sibyl appeared beside him. She looked at the stone tablet and said, "The Day-Night clan truly has an ancient heritage. No one in the Innerverse can compare to their foundation." Night King Zhenwu smiled. "The Sword Sect is the true #1 power in the Innerverse." Star Sibyl smiled. "Once you become one of the 5 astral children, they won't be." Night King Zhenwu's lips curled up. Indeed, as long as he became one of the 5 astral children and obtained a progenitor's inheritance, he would no longer have to worry about the Day-Night clan not becoming the strongest in the Neoverse. No, he wanted to lead the Day-Night clan into the Neoverse and truly rival the Sirius sect and the Mavis sect. There were murals on both sides of the corridor that looked very lifelike, and one could even hear howls from long ago. Lu Yin looked at the murals seriously, but he did not know what they depicted. Could be a battle technique, a war, or even something related to the Day-Night clan itself. The corridor changed and Lu Yin walked step by step into its depths. Suddenly, a spear pierced through the void, whistling through the air as it pierced towards Lu Yin's forehead. Lu Yin tilted his head, and the spear whistled past him before disappearing. In that instant he received information about the spear. The Day-Night spear, a spear-style battle technique from the Day-Night clan. Lu Yin shook his head as he had no interest in the Day-Night spear, and he continued walking forward. Not long after, a figure appeared in front of him, streaking through the void at an incredible speed. Lu Yin's eyes trembled. This was White Flash, a speed technique from the Day-Night clan that Lulu Mavis had inherited. Lu Yin had long since learned the technique of White Flash, and his current speed was purely driven by his physical body. It surpassed everything and there was no upper limit to it. He continued walking forward. Along the way he saw the Day-Night staff, Day-Night palm and Night Flash, all of which were battle techniques that Qingyu had once used. He also saw the luminous finger, which was a battle technique that Hui Day Knight had once used. He also saw the white void sword, which was a battle technique that Zhou Day Knight had once used. The deeper he went, the stronger the battle techniques he encountered became. Back in the Day Knight clan's ancestral land, Lu Yin's image continued to rise from the bottom, and he had already reached the middle of the lower reaches. If not for the fact that everyone was focused on the competition at the very top, someone would have noticed Lu Yin a long time ago, but no one had noticed him yet. Gradually, Lu Yin reached the halfway point of the corridor, and his spiritual force almost materialized as it whizzed past him. It was enough to suppress an ordinary hunter, but it was still useless against him. In front of him, an angry roar shook the void, and it almost scared Lu Yin out of his wits. This was the Night King's roar, a battle technique that Night King Yuanjing had used. Lu Yin had no interest in the Night King's roar, so he continued walking forward. The deeper he went, the greater the pressure he felt. However, this pressure did not have much effect on Lu Yin. He was getting closer and closer to the end of the corridor, and it really was the end. However, Lu Yin was certain that very few people would be able to reach it. Suddenly, his body tensed up and he felt an indescribable pressure. What is this? The Night King's body? There were not many powerhouses in the Day Knight clan who could use the Night King's body. Night Queen Yanqing was one of them, the deceased Night King Chongfeng was another, and Night King Gu was also one of them. There seemed to be many people who could use the Night King's body, but there were only a few people in the Day Knight clan who could use it. However, those who had comprehended the Night King's body had all reached the peak. Night Queen Yanqing had relied on the Night King's body to close the gap between their battle force levels and engage in a peak battle with Lu Yin. The Night King's body was still very useful, but unfortunately, it was not very attractive to Lu Yin. His physical strength was enough to suppress the Night King's body. The moment Lu Yin accepted the Night King's body's inheritance, someone finally noticed him in the Day Knight clan's ancestral grounds. The first to notice him were the ancient guardian figures. This kid is climbing so quickly. He was at the bottom before, but now he's almost at the top. He's surpassed quite a few people. Strange, why doesn't this kid have black and white hair? The figure in the middle suddenly opened his eyes and looked up at the top of the stone tablet. His expression changed. An outsider is accepting the inheritance. Immediately summon Night King Zhenwu. It was not just them. Many other Day Knight clan members also saw Lu Yin's image. He was climbing too quickly. Look, that person doesn't seem to be from our Day Knight clan. Someone exclaimed. Many people looked over. That's strange. This person looks familiar. Where have I seen him before? You think so too? I feel like I've seen him somewhere before. Me too. I've definitely seen him before. Chapter 1022. Not too far away, Hui Day Knight opened his eyes and rubbed his forehead. Accepting the inheritance had been very tiring, and it was time to rest. Hui Day Knight heard a cry of surprise and he curiously looked up. His pupils shrank when he saw who it was. Lu Yin. This was the first time Lu Yin's name had appeared in the Day Knight clan's ancestral land, and it had quickly shaken the entire ancestral land and even the entire Day Knight clan. Who would have thought that an outsider would be able to accept the Day Knight clan's inheritance and quickly climb to the top of the stone tablet? He was about to reach the top and compete with Night Queen Yanqing and the others. This had never happened before in the history of the Day Knight clan. Kong Day Knight, Ro Day Knight, and the rest stared at the top of the stone tablet in a daze, as if they had been struck dumb. They could still remember their confrontation in the Astral Combat Academy, where Lu Yin had single-handedly taken on the entire Day Knight clan. It had been a long time since that incident, and they had never thought that they would meet this person again. In the distance, Night King Zhenwu's pupils shrank as he stared at Lu Yin's image on the stone tablet. Impossible. He was hit by the heart arrow and didn't die? Impossible. Beside him, Starsibyl's eyes lit up, and her fingers subconsciously trembled. She was divining, heading towards an unknown direction. This person could never be divined. Night King Zhenwu's expression suddenly changed, and he tore through the void to appear below the stone tablet and in front of the ancient figures. Junior Night King Zhenwu greets the seniors of the ancestral land. The central figure's eyes were turbid, but they contained a supreme dignity. He calmly looked at Night King Zhenwu. Return the inheritance stone. Night King Zhenwu's expression changed again and he bowed deeply. Zhenwu has sinned and lost the inheritance stone. Please punish me, seniors of the ancestral land. The figures all looked at Night King Zhenwu, and the central figure spoke in a heavy tone. It doesn't matter if you lost the inheritance stone. No one in the universe dares to covet our Day Night clan's possessions, but that was in the past. The figure then looked up at the stone tablet. That child has appeared, and he has inherited our Day Night clan's battle techniques from an outsider. This is a great crime, and it's his crime as well as yours. Night King Zhenwu's eyes were filled with hatred. This junior understands. Please rest assured, senior. This junior will personally kill this person and use his head to wash away the humiliation of my Day Night clan's inheritance stone. That's a story for later. The central figure shouted. The starry sky trembled and even the ancestral land shook. Night King Zhenwu's body tensed up and he bowed deeply. Please enlighten me, senior. No matter what happens in the future, at this moment, my ancestral land's stone tablet will not be allowed to be trampled upon by outsiders. Do you understand? The figure in the center shouted as he stared at Night King Zhenwu with a powerful pressure. Night King Zhenwu was indeed very important to the Day Night clan, as he was one of the people who had the highest chance of becoming a progenitor. However, Night King Zhenwu was still a member of the younger generation, and it would be a long time before he could reach the level that these ancient figures feared. At this moment, Night King Zhenwu had to endure the pressure from his elders. Junior understands, and I definitely won't let such a thing happen. Senior, please rest assured. Night King Zhenwu bowed deeply. Frostwave weave sinew star, in a secret room in King Zishan's palace. Lu Yin did not know that he had caused trouble for Night King Zhenwu and had shaken the entire Day Night clan. He did not know that once he entered the inheritance, his image would appear on the stone tablet in the Day Night clan's ancestral grounds. At this moment he had already dispersed the Night King's body, so he did not need to accept this inheritance. He lifted his foot and continued walking forward. The murals in the corridor were very lifelike, but Lu Yin could not understand them. Furthermore, after entering the inheritance, the ghost monkey did not make any movements. When he thought about it, it was likely that only his spiritual force would enter while his physical body would remain outside. Lu Yin raised his finger, but unfortunately he did not have his cosmic ring. Otherwise he would have thought of a way to copy the murals in the corridor. At that moment, a strange force appeared above his finger, attempting to break it. Lu Yin's eyes trembled. It was another battle technique. The Day Night clan had many battle techniques, and they were indeed terrifying. This battle technique was called Yin Wind Finger, and it was even more powerful than the Night King's body. The name did not sound like much, but it was very powerful. It cultivated star energy into a Yin wind that corroded the enemy's body and could destroy it from the inside. Lu Yin did not like this battle technique. With his physical strength, if he still needed to rely on this battle technique to fight, then his chances of winning would be very low. Up until now, none of the Day Night clan experts that he had encountered had used Yin Wind Finger. At this moment he was not far from the end of the corridor. The further in he went, the more terrifying the battle technique inheritance became. After taking a few more steps, Lu Yin's spiritual force trembled, and he subconsciously stopped. The spiritual force suppression here was already putting pressure on him, and it would not be easy to pass through. However, he could still pass through it if he took a break. Black and white alternated in front of his eyes as the Day-Night fist appeared once more, attempting to blast Lu Yin away. Lu Yin did not care about the Day-Night fist, but in the next moment, all of the battle techniques that he had encountered before began to attack him, trying to push him out of the corridor. Lu Yin roared and subconsciously used his Night King's roar to disperse all of the battle techniques. He then raised his foot and stepped forward once more. A gust of wind swept past and Lu Yin saw a figure cultivating in front of him. This person was actually cultivating the Day-Night Restoration Technique. The Day-Night Restoration Technique was located near the deepest part of the corridor, and currently only Zhanlong Day-Night had learned it in the entire Day-Night clan. It was not that no one had received this inheritance, but only Zhanlong Day-Night had been able to successfully cultivate it. Night Queen Yanqing had received the Day-Night Restoration Technique's inheritance based on her innate gift, but unfortunately she had not been able to learn it. Night King Zhenwu had also received the Day-Night Restoration Technique's inheritance, but it was unknown whether he had learned it or not. Lu Yin was one of the few people in the history of the Day-Night clan who had received the Day-Night Restoration Technique's inheritance, and he was also confident that he could learn it. This was because the arcane art of life and death that he had successfully cultivated was able to suppress the Day-Night Restoration Technique. The Day-Night Restoration Technique increased a person's recovery ability, and once successfully cultivated, they would possess a recovery ability that far surpassed that of a normal person. However, the arcane art of life and death suppressed a person's recovery ability and stimulated one's potential at the cost of one's recovery ability. Once successfully cultivated, one's potential would explode and one's strength would skyrocket. The arcane art of life and death was the natural nemesis of the Day-Night Restoration Technique. Lu Yin continued forward. He could not cultivate the Day-Night Restoration Technique as it was like poison to him. In the Day-Night clan's ancestral grounds, Lu Yin's image on the stone tablet surpassed Zhou Day-Night, Night Queen Yanqing and the others. He was now second only to Zhanlong Day-Night. Zhou Day-Night opened her eyes and looked at the image on the stone tablet. She was excited. "You're not dead." Night Queen Yanqing bit her lip. Why was he everywhere? She had been defeated in the Astral Combat Academy, she had lost the battle on planet Pyrolite, and she had been nothing more than a passerby in the Cosmic Sea Continent War. But this person had shone through the heavens, and even her elder brother had gone out of his way to hunt him down. Now this person had actually appeared in the Day-Night clan's ancestral grounds. Why? A trace of blood trickled down the corner of Night Queen Yanqing's mouth, but she did not feel anything. The battle for the ancestral grounds stone tablets had attracted countless geniuses from the Day-Night clan, but at this moment, all of them could only raise their heads and stare blankly at Lu Yin's image. There were only two people above him, Zhanlong Day-Night and Night King Jinwu. Everyone knew that Zhanlong Day-Night would be surpassed sooner or later. Night King Jinwu's face was gloomy. He did not believe that Lu Yin could surpass him, but it was also a humiliation for Lu Yin to surpass all the other members of the Day-Night clan. At this moment Zhanlong Day-Night returned. He glanced at the stone tablet and then tossed a drop of blood into the inheritance stone in the sky. He was about to begin accepting the inheritance as well. Inheritance was different from battle. He admitted that he was far from being Lu Yin's opponent and had been left far behind. However, this was the Day-Night clan's inheritance ground, and outsiders had to pay a higher price to receive the inheritance. Zhanlong Day-Night, on the other hand, had it much easier than Lu Yin. He did not believe that he would lose to Lu Yin here. Lu Yin's thoughts were the same as Zhanlong Day-Night's. He felt that it was strange, as the Day-Night Restoration Technique's spiritual force suppressed even Lu Yin's spiritual force. Zhanlong Day-Night had learned this technique long ago, and he might have learned it when he was a Limiter. No, he might have learned it when he was a Melder. Lu Yin did not believe it. The only explanation was that the Day-Night clan's inheritance was different from Lu Yin's. Lu Yin had to take one step at a time, while the Day-Night clan's situation was different. Lu Yin's guess was correct. The peak techniques at the end of the corridor were what had attracted the Day-Night clan to enter. In fact, if not for this, the Day-Night clan would not have needed to enter the corridor at all. The corridor contained many battle techniques, and as long as any Day-Night clan member stepped into the corridor, a matching battle technique would appear. Zhanlong Day-Night had comprehended the Day-Night Restoration Technique. If the others had not been able to accept the inheritance at the beginning, they could still walk further in and receive the inheritance once they reached the end of the corridor. Lu Yin did not accept the Day-Night Restoration Technique, so he continued walking deeper. He wanted to see what other techniques there were. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. He walked 7 steps in a row without receiving any techniques, but the spiritual force suppression he was enduring was unparalleled, and he was almost unable to bear it. The technocracy was on the brink of death, and the arcane art of life and death had stimulated his potential. Lu Yin's spiritual force had grown once again, and he was confident that he would not lose out to the 10 arbiters. Even Night King Jinwu had only been able to reach this position when he had become one of the 10 arbiters. Back in the Day-Night clan's ancestral grounds, Zhanlong Day-Night had comprehended the inheritance, which had inspired the confidence of many Day-Night clan members. Even though the Night King clan hated Zhanlong Day-Night, they had no choice but to rely on him to defeat Lu Yin. However, Lu Yin's image had surpassed Zhanlong Day-Night's, and he was now on the stone tablet, second only to Night King Jinwu. Night King Zhenwu's brows rose. Was this unexpected? It shouldn't be. This person had only cultivated for less than 10 years, but he was already strong enough to fight Night King Zhenwu. Every time they met, Lu Yin's strength would increase by leaps and bounds. During the battle for the general appointment platform, Lu Yin had even used the Night King heaven-splitting technique and the Heart Arrow secret technique. Even the Day-Night clan members who were second only to Night King Zhenwu would not be able to do such a thing, let alone Zhanlong Day-Night. Even Xia Tian, who was ranked first on the top 100 rankings, could not force Lu Yin to such an extent. Lu Yin was still alive, and if he made a comeback his strength would definitely increase. The next time they fought, it would not be easy to use the Heart Arrow secret technique to launch a sneak attack. It was normal for Zhanlong Day-Night to be surpassed, but it was a pity that Lu Yin would never be able to surpass Zhanlong Day-Night's position. Lu Yin did not even know where Zhanlong Day-Night was, as few people in the history of the Day-Night clan had ever reached that position. When Lu Yin surpassed Zhanlong Day-Night was no longer able to catch up. Countless members of the Day-Night clan sighed, as they had actually been suppressed by an outsider. Lu Yin could not advance any further in the corridor. His vision darkened and everything became blurry. The moment he took a step forward, the spiritual force suppression suddenly underwent a qualitative change, and it even seemed to solidify. He knew that this was a battle technique and its name was Nightfall. Chapter 1023. With his current position he could either accept the inheritance and learn Nightfall or leave the corridor. Lu Yin did not want to leave and he did not need to advance any further. With his current spiritual force he could not advance any further. He needed to learn Nightfall, which would allow him to perfectly utilize his spiritual force, which far surpassed the Day-Night Fist. A day passed and in the Day-Night clan's ancestral grounds, Zhanlong Day-Night opened his eyes and looked at the stone tablet. He discovered that Lu Yin's image had already surpassed his own. Zhanlong Day-Night was helpless, but he did not want to admit defeat. He would continue to comprehend the inheritance until he surpassed this person. Night King Zhenwu was once again summoned by the people guarding the stone tablet. The person in charge told him to find someone to suppress Lu Yin, but if that was possible Zhanlong Day-Night would have already been suppressed by the Night King clan. If even Zhanlong Day-Night could not suppress Lu Yin, then Night King Zhenwu could not do anything about it. He had been reprimanded and punished by the clan. This was what Lu Yin had done to him and he needed to vent. For this reason he had slaughtered the entire Day-Night clan in front of Zhou Day-Night. You should hate him since you let him go. If it weren't for him, you wouldn't have had to expose Night's End Daybreak. You still had a chance to regain your freedom for the Day-Night clan, but it was destroyed because of him. If it weren't for him these people wouldn't have had to die. Hate him since it's all because of him, Night King Zhenwu said before turning to leave. Zhou Day-Night was left behind in grief as she looked at the corpses of the Day-Night clan members. On Xenu Star in a secret room in King Zishan's palace, Lu Yin suddenly opened his eyes. His face was deathly pale and he fell into a deep sleep. The Day-Night clan's inheritance stone fell to the ground with a crisp sound. How dare you? Lu Yin roared as he opened his eyes and stood up. He had dreamt of a finger descending and trying to crush him. His uncontrollable rage woke him up. He slept for 10 days. In order to comprehend Nightfall in the corridor, he had nearly overdrawn his spiritual force, and he had only barely woken up after 10 days of sleep. When he woke up he felt a splitting headache. It was the same feeling he had when he had shaken the die and he had also dreamt of that finger. Even at his current level he could not understand where that finger had come from. If not for the jade that Mr. Mu had given him during the battle in the astral graveyard, he would have died. That finger had come from a sage and that person's power was unfathomable. Moreover, he couldn't help but shout out the word, audacious. Beads of sweat dripped down from his forehead as he put the stone away. He closed his eyes and exhaled. Nightfall had learned it. Lu Yin's weakness in spiritual force attacks had been fixed, and he no longer needed the Day-Night Punch. The Day-Night Punch was too obvious and anyone with a bit of knowledge would know that it was a battle technique from the Day-Night clan. However, Nightfall was different. Lu Yin wondered who was the first person to try out this battle technique. Perhaps it was Lan Si. They still had a battle agreement. He'd originally planned on using the Heaven Fire Stones to cultivate, but his head hurt so badly that he wanted to rest for a while. Walking out of the secret room, he was greeted by Zhou Ran. "Your Highness, you're out? Do you want a cup of flower tea?" Zhou Ran asked happily. Lu Yin nodded. "All right." Within the garden, Lu Yin was enjoying a rare moment of peace, but the Western weaves were in an uproar. A few days ago, Lu Yin had allowed Wang and the others to use their authority as commanders of the Outerverse allied forces to cause trouble for the weaves that were hostile to the Great Eastern Alliance. It was not wartime, and there would not be a war that would require the mobilization of the entire Outerverse in the near future. However, it was always better to prepare for a rainy day. Wang, Wei Rong, Enya, and the others used their authority as commanders to mobilize the various large powers in the Western weaves to transfer resources, construct military express routes, establish joint research centers, and so on. There were dozens of such requests which shocked the various weaves. This was clearly a prank, but it could not be said that it was a complete prank. Once war truly broke out, these actions would greatly increase the Allied forces' strength. This was awkward, as even if they complained to the Hall of Honor, it would be useless. The commander of the Allied forces had the authority to do so, and he had not made them work for free. In fact, the Great Eastern Alliance was even willing to pay a fee. It would have been fine if it was just a small task, but transferring resources to a specific location was unacceptable to these powers. Wasn't this clearly telling the Great Eastern Alliance where their resources were hidden? They couldn't move. This was a common feeling among the various large powers in the Western weaves. They felt as if their intelligence had been beaten to a pulp, and they could not even resist. Fortunately, this was just the beginning, and Wang and the others had controlled their strength and did not go overboard. The next step was to mobilize the troops and familiarize themselves with the Allied forces' battle techniques. At that time, there was a real possibility that they would shed all pretense of cordiality. If they still had not shed all pretense of cordiality by then they could start from economic cooperation. This was the commander of the Allied forces' special authority. He was clearly trying to prank them, but they were not in the right. These actions were indeed beneficial to the Outerverse Allied forces' unification. The various large powers in the Western weaves could reluctantly accept Wang and the others' orders, but Shamrock Enterprises could not. When the Outerverse Allied forces mobilized for war, everyone had to listen to orders. The commander of the Outerverse Allied forces had the authority to issue orders to behemoths like Shamrock Enterprises and Mace Bank. Enya had not forgotten the humiliation she had suffered in the past, so she immediately issued an order to Shamrock Enterprises, ordering them to prepare commonly used medicines and store them in designated locations in case of emergency. This order had just been issued, but it was rejected by Shamrock Enterprises. Lu Yin only found out about this matter a few days later. During these few days, Lu Yin rested well and even found some time to go to a tavern for a drink. "Your Highness, please punish me." Enya bowed respectfully and stood in front of Lu Yin. Lu Yin drank a cup of flower tea and said, "It's not a big deal. We have the authority to issue orders to Shamrock Enterprises." Enya lowered her voice. "I used my authority for personal gain." Lu Yin smiled and looked at Enya. "I told you that I would take revenge for you one day. That day has been delayed for quite some time, and it's time." Enya was moved. "Thank you, Your Highness." It was not that she cared about herself, but rather that she wanted to take revenge on Shamrock Enterprises because Yu Mu had insulted Shui Chuanshao. Shui Chuanshao was the person she respected the most, and she would not allow anyone to insult him. Lu Yin looked at Enya. "Do you still remember the first time we met?" Enya nodded. "As a student of the Astral Combat Academy, Your Highness participated in the border training and made great contributions. The commander rewarded you. You were the one who took me to planet Songyuan at the border of the wind flow zone. Every planet was guarded by explorers and the battles there were not that intense." Enya replied, "The border battles in the wind flow zone were indeed not that intense, which is why the Astral Combat Academy students were able to participate in the training. Otherwise, if the Innerverse and Outerverse had just been separated, such as the battles in Ironblood Weave or the border of Endless Weave or the Sixth Mainland's invasion, the students would not have been able to participate." Lu Yin understood. Ironblood Weave and Endless Weave were both terrifying battlefields, and even a hunter would have to rely on luck to survive. No, even an enlighter would need some luck to survive. Of course, there was also the recent battle in the Cosmic Sea, which had been just as brutal. I remember you telling me that Commander Shui purposely lost in order to connect the entire human domains network, which led to the fall of half of Endless Weave. That was why he was imprisoned in Kuan's swamp for 10,000 years. Enya's expression dimmed at the mention of this. As long as the human domains network is not connected, many things cannot be done. Even the Hall of Honor's orders cannot be transmitted in time. Your Highness should know that if the network was not connected, then the reinforcements during the battle in Ironblood Weave might not have been able to arrive in time. Lu Yin had experienced this firsthand as he himself had been forcibly conscripted, and the border battles in Endless Weave were the same. The network had not been connected, and the Hall of Honor had not been able to forcibly conscript anyone. Shui Chuanxiao's boldness was not inferior to the Sea King's. The Sea King had gambled the entire Fifth Mainland, while Shui Chuanxiao had gambled on himself. It was unknown whether these two people were still alive or not. Enya suddenly half knelt. Your Highness, I beg you to seek justice for Commander Shui. Lu Yin hurriedly helped her up. There's no need for this. Enya refused to get up and her eyes were red as tears dripped down her cheeks. Your Highness, Commander Shui has done me a great favor. If possible, Enya would rather serve his sentence. In the entire Innerverse and Outerverse aside from Your Highness, there's no one else who can help Commander Shui. Lu Yin fell silent. Although Shui Chuanxiao had made a great contribution in order to connect the network, it was a fact that he had caused the human domain's defeat, and he had also destroyed half of Endless Weave. This was a great crime. The Hall of Honor's actions were not wrong and Shui Chuanxiao had not been wronged. Enya sobbed. Your Highness, Commander Shui has made great contributions, but he has also made great mistakes. However, serving a sentence is not enough to make up for his mistakes. Commander Shui is known as the wisest commander in human history, so shouldn't he display his abilities? Even if he's just a small soldier on the battlefield, it's still better than silently serving a sentence until he dies of old age. Lu Yin's eyes lit up as Enya's words had reminded him of something. Enya was right, it would be a pity not to use Shui Chuanxiao's wisdom. The Hall of Honor had already made a clear decision that Shui Chuanxiao was the wisest commander in human history. Lu Yin had destroyed half of Endless Weave, but he had not been executed. It was easy to imagine how much the Hall of Honor could not bear to see him go, or rather how great his contributions to humanity were. It would be too much of a waste for such a person to simply serve a sentence in Earth's swamp. Lu Yin currently had Wang and Wei Rong, but he lacked a commander-in-chief. Shui Chuanxiao was the most suitable candidate. Enya understood Lu Yin very well, having interacted with him for several years. She knew that this was the only way to move him. Otherwise, why would he pay such a huge price to save Shui Chuanxiao? Shui Chuanxiao's crimes were too great, and she was not sure if Lu Yin could save him. However, Lu Yin was her only hope. Once he unified the Outerverse and became the master of the Outerverse, his status would be completely different. Saving Shui Chuanxiao from Kuan's swamp would no longer be a dream. Your Highness, do you agree? Enya asked expectantly. Lu Yin muttered to himself for a moment. I'll give it a try. Enya was delighted. Thank you, Your Highness. Thank you, Your Highness. Lu Yin hurriedly helped her up. Your Highness, your subordinate will definitely help you unify the Outerverse as soon as possible, Enya said resolutely. Her long golden hair flowed down her back, giving her a gentle beauty. Lu Yin was the kind of person who would follow through once he made his stance clear. Shui Chuanxiao's value was worth his effort. Sui Feng had gone on a business trip again over the past few days. Thank you, brothers, for your continued support. Sui Feng guarantees that he will update as much as possible. Thank you, brothers, thank you. Chapter 1024. As a great sinner, even if Shui Chuanxiao did not die, he would not be used by the Hall of Honor again. As long as Lu Yin saved him, the chances of him joining the Great Yu Empire would be very high. However, before that happened, Lu Yin needed to do something. Continue to issue conscription orders to Shamrock Enterprises, Lu Yin said. Enya hurriedly acknowledged and immediately issued the order. Lu Yin sipped his tea and looked at the distant sky. Whether it was for Shui Chuanxiao or himself, there were some things that needed to be done. He had kept the cosmic ring that Yu Mu had thrown at him, and it was time to return it. Not long after, Enya replied, Your Highness, Shamrock Enterprises refuses to accept the order. Send it again, Lu Yin said. Enya's eyes lit up. Yes. At the same time on the Green Planet, Shamrock Enterprises' Eastern Frontier president, Shen Fu, was no longer as calm. He had always been calm, and even when Western Frontier's president, Offman, had died, he had remained calm. He had been reclining in his wooden chair the entire time, and he had only joined the battlefield when the Sixth Mainland had invaded and the Hall of Honor had forcefully conscripted him. After the war ended, he had returned and continued rocking in his chair, which was very comfortable. But now he was a little anxious. President Yu really doesn't care about Lu Yin. He's already refused twice. Behind him, Xiaoqin frowned. President Shen, if the Great Eastern Alliance issues a third conscription, what should we do? Shen Fu was vexed. Just send it to President Yu. What if President Yu still refuses? Xiaoqin asked. Shen Fu's head hurt and he stared at his gadget nervously. He had not cared about Lu Yin at first, but later on he had become apprehensive and now he was worried. How many years had it been? This young man was too freakish. He was only a cruiser, but he had killed more enlighters than anyone else. This person did not care about enlighters at all, and it was said that he had even killed 2 envoy-level powerhouses. Shen Fu knew about the conflict between President Yu and this person, but he did not know whether the Great Eastern Alliance had deliberately lowered the price of medicine to attack Shamrock Enterprises. However, President Yu had suppressed the Great Eastern Alliance at that time, which had sowed the seeds of today's disaster. Shen Fu had a premonition that the Great Eastern Alliance's order would not be simple. Perhaps they were waiting for Shamrock Enterprises to refuse. Shen Fu and Xiaoqin looked over at the same time and their expressions changed. The third conscription order was here. Xiaoqin couldn't help but speak up. You've been conscripted 3 times but you refused. Shen Fu sighed. There's no other way. Send it to Boss Yu. As soon as he sent the conscription order to Yu Mu replied, don't worry about it. Shen Fu exhaled. I refuse. Xiaoqin's heart skipped a beat. Mr. Shen, we can complete the conscription with the stock in our area. Shen Fu shook his head. You don't understand, Director Yu. If we can think of this, then he can also think of the same thing. He can show Lu Yin goodwill because of how outstanding he is, but he can also completely ignore it if he goes against Lu Yin. If we accept the conscription without permission, then no matter what happens in the future between him and Lu Yin, we'll be the first to suffer. Xiaoqin had no choice but to reject the conscription. Shen Fu was right, as Yu Mu truly did not care about Lu Yin. Shamrock Enterprises was not a Weaves organization. They had originated from the Innerverse, but they had managed to expand their business to the Cosmic Sea and the Neoverse. This was all due to Shamrock Enterprises' strength. So what if Lu Yin unified the Outerverse? Yu Mu did not believe that this brat would dare to openly oppose Shamrock Enterprises. He did not understand Shamrock Enterprises at all. Even the Hall of Honor would not casually offend Shamrock Enterprises. Lu Yin had the Hall of Honor's backing, and Shamrock Enterprises was not bad either. Shamrock Enterprises handed over countless medicines to the Hall of Honor every year, which was a huge contribution. The Hall of Honor would not make things difficult for Lu Yin. Without the Hall of Honor's backing, Yu Mu did not believe that Lu Yin could do anything to him. As for the battle in the astral graveyard where he had killed an emissary, he had relied on an external item. As long as Yu Mu had not betrayed the human race, Lu Yin would not dare to use such an external item against him. Furthermore, such an external item could only be used once, and Yu Mu did not believe that this brat would pay such a huge price over such a small matter. What made Yu Mu fearless of the Great Eastern Alliance was that the Astral River's decline was accelerating, and it would probably recover soon. At that time, it would be good enough if Shamrock Enterprises did not deal with the Great Eastern Alliance. Xenu Star, King Zishan's palace. Enya's voice was low. Your Highness, Shamrock Enterprises has rejected the conscription for the 3rd time. Lu Yin stood up. Let's go and meet our Director Yu. Enya had issued the conscription order to Shamrock Enterprises through the public network, so it was not considered a secret. Many people had seen it, and at this moment Shamrock Enterprises had rejected Lu Yin's conscription 3 times in a row, which had attracted quite a bit of attention. Many people brought up the matter of Yu Mu suppressing the Great Eastern Alliance, and those who knew about this understood why the Great Eastern Alliance had only issued the order to Shamrock Enterprises. They also understood why Shamrock Enterprises had directly rejected the conscription without any room for negotiation. In the southern weaves, Elder Big Drum felt a headache coming on. Lu Yin had stirred up trouble again, and this time he had provoked Shamrock Enterprises. This Lu Yin had always been smart, so why had he suddenly provoked Shamrock Enterprises? How troublesome. Most people did not know Yumu's location, but at Lu Yin's level, there were no secrets in the Outerverse. With the speed of a collapsible spacecraft, it took less than 8 days to travel from Xenu Star to Yumu's planet. The moment Lu Yin left Xenu Star, someone immediately spread the news of his departure. Lu Yin did not block the news, or else no one would have known that he had left. He wanted to let others know that he had left, and his goal was obvious. When Yumu had captured Enya and brought her to Xenu Star, many people had seen it as well. That was an insult to Enya, and it was also an insult to Lu Yin. Yumu's insufferably arrogant behavior was something that Lu Yin wanted to return in kind. Wei Rong also learned that Lu Yin had left, and he looked up at the sky. Lu Yin's cosmic ring was going to be returned to Yumu, so what about Wei Rong? He did not want to borrow Lu Yin's strength, even if he had already submitted to Lu Yin. More and more people in the Outerverse knew that Lu Yin had left Xenu Star. A few days later, Lu Yin was not too far away from Yumu's planet. Elder Novar contacted him. Alliance leader Lu, you've already unified half of the Outerverse and your status is unparalleled. There's no need to offend Shamrock Enterprises over some past misunderstanding. Shamrock Enterprises is not that simple. Lu Yin solemnly replied, Elder, there's no need to say anything else. I know that Shamrock Enterprises is very powerful, and even the Hall of Honor would not easily offend them. However, there are some things that cannot be forgotten so easily. Elder, don't worry, I will not go overboard. Elder Novar understood Lu Yin, and he knew that he could not stop Lu Yin when he saw Lu Yin's expression. It was impossible to threaten Lu Yin by revealing Shamrock Enterprises' strength. Lu Yin was not even afraid of the Day-Night clan or the Sword Sect, so Shamrock Enterprises was even less of a threat. Ever since Lu Yin had stepped onto the path of cultivation, he had offended too many people. His innate gift was a sin in itself, but so what? This was cultivation, and this was fighting for one's life. He could not back down on the path of cultivation, and he had been able to stand at the top because of his own hard work. He had even sought out a background to protect himself, and it had all been done by himself. It had not been a favor from anyone. If he did not even dare to offend Shamrock Enterprises' Outerverse president, then how could he resist the Day-Night clan? How could he compete with the geniuses of the Neoverse? In front of those people, Yumu was just a passerby, even if his power level was very high. A few days later, Lu Yin stared at the giant green planet in front of him as his collapsible spacecraft pierced through the atmosphere and crashed into the ground. There was a loud crash, and the planet's guards were furious. This was Shamrock Enterprises' headquarters, and no one dared to be disrespectful. They could not even be bothered to seal off the heavens. Anyone who came to this planet would follow the rules and inform them in advance. Now, someone had actually dared to barge in recklessly, which was simply courting death. Lu Yin put away his collapsible spacecraft and took to the skies with Enya. He then unleashed his domain without restraint. The planet's guards were all from Shamrock Enterprises, and there were hunters among them. When they sensed Lu Yin's domain, they knew that this person was not simple. However, based on their power level, they were only at the cruiser realm. Report your identity, the hunter from the planet's guards shouted. Lu Yin raised his head and his voice spread across the entire planet. President Yu, is this how Shamrock Enterprises treats their guests? The planet's guards were all speechless. This person was looking for President Yu, so his identity was definitely not simple. Wait, why did he look so familiar? You're Lu Yin, the hunter cried out. Lu Yin did not care about this person at all, and he continued to look towards the west. Boundless rune lines approached, and Yumu descended. He waved his hand and dispersed the planet's guards. So it's Alliance Master Lu. What brings you to Shamrock Enterprises? Yumu asked calmly. Lu Yin smiled. It's nothing major. The Outerverse is constantly being invaded by foreign enemies, and as the commander of the Alliance army, I want to make some preparations. Unfortunately, Shamrock Enterprises refuses to accept my orders. Does President Yu have any explanation for this? Yumu replied, Shamrock Enterprises sends large amounts of medicine to the border every year, so they don't need to accept your forceful conscription. President Yu, it seems like you don't understand my words. I said forcefully conscripted. Lu Yin's tone sank and he sounded rather unfriendly. Yu Mu's eyes narrowed as he stared at Lu Yin. Alliance Master Lu, I respect your achievements at such a young age, so I'll pretend that I never heard your words. Shamrock Enterprises is not an outerverse weave, so you'd better consider your next words carefully. Lu Yin clasped his hands behind his back. Seems like President Yu is threatening me, the commander of the Outerverse Alliance. Does this mean that I'm betraying the alliance? Yu Mu was enraged. Lu Yin, you're too impudent. Even the Hall of Honor's Elder Big Drum wouldn't dare speak to me like that. Lu Yin arrogantly replied, threatening the commander of the alliance army is betraying the alliance. President Yu, I respect you as a senior, so I'll give you a chance to take back what you just said and I won't pursue the matter. Many people from the Outerverse had already arrived at this planet and were watching from afar. They had thought that the two of them would at least try to sound each other out, but they had not expected that a few words would ignite a conflict that could no longer be resolved. Many people were excited as they came from the media. The media loved to watch a good show, and the bigger the situation the better. It would be best if the Great Eastern Alliance and Shamrock Enterprises went to war. The people from the Western Weaves were even more excited than the media, as they hoped that the Great Eastern Alliance would go to war with Shamrock Enterprises. That way Shamrock Enterprises would become their ally. Chapter 1025. Yu Mu's eyes were filled with rage. How many years had it been since he had been provoked by a junior like this? What Outerverse Allied Forces commander? If it weren't for the rumors that this person was dead, then he would not have been given such great honor. It seems like you don't understand Shamrock Enterprises' strength, Yu Mu said slowly. Lu Yin's eyes flashed and a cosmic ring appeared in his hand. Do you still remember this, Mr. Yu? Yu Mu looked over and hesitated. The one from back then? Lu Yin nodded. Yes, the one you gave me as an apology. I threw it on the ground. He then let go and the cosmic ring slowly fell to the ground under everyone's watchful eyes. Yu Mu's gaze turned cold. Mr. Yu, can I trouble you to pick it up for me? Lu Yin asked. Yu Mu was completely enraged and even Enya was shocked. Yu Mu was still a super powerhouse and it was already difficult enough to force him to apologize. Now Yu Mu was actually trying to force him to pick up the cosmic ring. This was no longer justice but humiliation. Yu Mu was so angry that he laughed. Lu Yin, do you really think that you can control the entire Outerverse with one hand? What makes you think you can do that? The Hall of Honor's background? Or the external item that you used to kill the emissaries? Lu Yin looked up. I'm not relying on my background or external items. Mr. Yu, you are very confident in your own strength. Then I'll allow you to suppress your power level to 200,000 and have a fair battle. If you defeat me, all our past grievances will be written off. If you lose, pick up the cosmic ring and apologize to us. Yu Mu was shocked and looked at Lu Yin in confusion. Lu Yin's lips curled up. So? You don't dare? I'm only a cruiser. Yu Mu stared at Lu Yin and recalled all of Lu Yin's past battles. Suddenly he recalled that Lu Yin had disappeared after the battle in the astral graveyard, and he should be in the Innerverse. The Innerverse was suppressed by the astral phenomenon, and everyone's power level had to be suppressed to 200,000. If this kid dared to challenge him like this, then he definitely had something to rely on. Yu Mu wasn't so sure. Lu Yin laughed. It seems like you don't dare. Then I'll give you a second option. I won't use the external item that killed the emissaries and you can use your full strength. If you lose, the same conditions apply. Yu Mu frowned. Lu Yin's challenge had been heard by many people and he couldn't back down. Boss, you still doesn't dare? Lu Yin raised his brows. Don't tell me that you think that I shouldn't rely on external items to fight you, President Yu. If I can use external items, then so can President Yu. Yu Mu took a deep breath as Lu Yin continued to press him down. He had no other choice. If he didn't accept the challenge, then the Innerverse and Outerverse would be connected, and Shamrock Enterprises headquarters would remove him. Fine, Lu Yin. You can use external items, but if you beat me, I'll apologize. Lu Yin pointed at the ground. And the ring. Yu Mu shouted, We'll talk after you've defeated me. His figure suddenly disappeared as he took the initiative to attack. His combat power was 370,000, and when he attacked, the weather changed and the stars stirred. Yu was shocked. Lu Yin pushed Enya away and equipped his universal armor. At the same time he took out his single-sided mirror. In an instant the void distorted and the screen of fish unwittingly appeared. Lu Yin's expression changed greatly, as his star energy had been uncontrollably absorbed into the single-sided mirror. The mirror had been upgraded 13 times, and it could now absorb the star energy of a powerhouse with a power level of around 400,000. Yu Mu's power level hadn't even reached that level yet, so the moment the mirror appeared his star energy was sealed and he couldn't move. Lu Yin took out the giant's right arm and put it on before viciously swatting it at Yu Mu. Yu Mu's scalp went numb as the giant's right arm gave him an unprecedented sense of terror. It felt like the sky was collapsing and he subconsciously dodged. Although he wasn't proficient in physical strength, he was still a powerhouse with a power level of 300,000, so his physical body wouldn't be weak either. With his physical strength he could easily tear through the void and escape. The void was torn apart by the giant's right arm, and a powerful gale swept across the planet. It then turned into a shockwave that tore through the atmosphere and blasted into outer space. If one looked at it from outer space they would see a huge shockwave sweeping out. Yu Mu's face paled and he stared at the giant's right arm in disbelief. He then looked at the single-sided mirror. What the hell? One could absorb his star energy, while the other was so terrifying that he couldn't even think of resisting. Lu Yin put on his universal armor and held the single-sided mirror in his left hand while he put on the giant's right arm. At this moment he could even fight a powerhouse with a power level of 400,000, let alone Yu Mu. Yu Mu's expression turned ugly. Where had Lu Yin gotten so many external items from? Even the Hall of Honor couldn't possibly have so many, unless he had the support of the Hall of Honor's headquarters in the Neoverse. The Hall of Honor alone wouldn't be able to support him with so many external items. Just what kind of background did this person have in the Hall of Honor? Public opinion was a powerful weapon. If one person said that Lu Yin's background was the Hall of Honor, no one would believe it. However, the entire Outerverse was spreading rumors that Lu Yin's background was the Hall of Honor, and with Master Yuan's support, even Lu Yin himself couldn't deny it. In the distance, countless people were dumbfounded. They only had one thought: don't try to compete with Lu Yin with external items. Lu Yin looked at Yu Mu. How about it, Director Yu? Do you still want to fight? Yu Mu took a deep breath. I can't beat you with these external items, but don't forget that you can't beat me either. Is that so? Lu Yin's lips curled up. Director Yu, be careful. He then waved his hand and activated the Yu secret art. A smothering cannon appeared behind Yu Mu and then exploded. A terrifying shockwave tore through the void and sent Yu Mu flying towards the ground. Each smothering cannon had the power of 220,000 enlighters attacking at full power. Although the fish screen far surpassed an enlighter with a power level of 220,000, Lu Yin still had more than one smothering cannon. Following the smothering cannon's attack was a super flash. Yu Mu had never thought that he would one day be attacked by a teardrop bomb. He couldn't help but take out a power vessel to retaliate. As the president of Shamrock Enterprises in the Outerverse, he naturally had a power vessel of his own, but before he could take it out, it was transferred by the Yu secret art. Lu Yin then detonated 3 smothering cannons and sent Yu Mu flying. He then appeared above Yu Mu's head and swatted out with his right arm. Yu Mu gritted his teeth and tried to dodge, but Lu Yin's single-sided mirror was always on him, and his star energy wasn't as nimble as before. Under the influence of the teardrop bomb, Yu Mu's speed was slightly slower, and Lu Yin's attack landed on his shoulder. His left arm was completely crippled and twisted at an irregular angle. Lu Yin took the opportunity to use his left palm against Yu Mu's chest and used his 9-line battle force for the first time. 100 stacks, 100-fold, shockwave palm. There was a thump as Yu Mu crashed into the ground, piercing through the earth and into the center of the planet where he fell into the lava. Countless people were stunned. The president of Shamrock Enterprises in the Outerverse had been defeated just like that? And Yu was shocked as well. She had known that Lu Yin would win since he could even destroy an emissary with a single attack. How could he lose? However, she hadn't expected Lu Yin to win so easily, and he hadn't even used an external item to kill an emissary. Boing. He clenched his right fist as his giant right arm wasn't as nimble. Fortunately, it was paired with the single-sided mirror. Under a power level of 400,000, it was very difficult to use any battle techniques with star energy, and any attacks that use star energy would be affected. Lu Yin specialized in physical strength, and even Yu Mu's physical strength couldn't compare to his own. Lu Yin's greatest weakness was his defense. His universal armor could only defend against attacks with a power level of 260,000. If Yu Mu had been able to attack him even once, Lu Yin would have been in trouble. However, the existence of the Yu secret art was enough to prevent Yu Mu from doing anything. Unless he met someone who specialized in physical strength like Lu Yin and could engage in close combat without being affected by the single-sided mirror, Lu Yin's chances of victory would be very low. No matter what, it was impossible for Yu Mu to defeat Lu Yin. Within the lava, Yu Mu opened his eyes and they were filled with rage. He leapt up and his left arm healed at a visible rate. Lu Yin's heart sank. He had forgotten that this guy was the president of Shamrock Enterprises, and he had too many special medicines. Unless Lu Yin could heavily injure him in one attack, it would be difficult for him to defeat Yu Mu. How could he have forgotten about that? Yu Mu panted heavily and stared at Lu Yin vigilantly. He was trying to think of a way to attack Lu Yin, as he did not believe that this kid's attacks would be so fierce and his defenses would be so powerful as well. In the sky, the two faced each other and stared at each other. Lu Yin was trying to think of a way to heavily injure Yu Mu in one attack and prevent him from taking his medicine. Yu Mu was trying to think of a way to close in and avoid the star energy interference. At that moment, Lu Yin looked up to see a figure tear through the void and walk out. It was Elder Big Drum. When he saw Elder Big Drum appear, Yu Mu's eyes flashed and his originally sharp gaze grew even colder. Lu Yin frowned. Elder Big Drum looked around and smiled bitterly. He then raised his hand, revealing the cosmic ring that Lu Yin had tossed onto the ground. Alliance Master Lu, can you let this matter go for the sake of the Hall of Honor? Lu Yin's eyes narrowed but he did not reply. Elder Big Drum looked at Yu Mu. Director Yu, Alliance Master Lu is the commander of the Outerverse Allied Forces, and he has the right to issue reasonable orders. If you refuse to accept them, then it is indeed unreasonable. Merit may not make up for it. What do you mean? Yu Mu's tone turned cold. Elder Big Drum explained, Shamrock Enterprises is a business and I believe that you do not wish to lose such a large market in the Outerverse. When the Innerverse and Outerverse reconnect, how will you answer if Director Yi asks? If you lose the entire Outerverse market because of a single misunderstanding, is it worth it? When he saw Yu Mu fall into deep thought, Elder Big Drum turned to Lu Yin and gestured for him to leave. Alliance Master Lu, may I have a word with you? Lu Yin knew that Elder Big Drum wanted to mediate this matter, and he muttered to himself for a moment. He had to give face to an elder from the Hall of Honor. Although Elder Big Drum wanted to rely on Lu Yin to return to the Hall of Honor's headquarters in the Neoverse, this was not something that Lu Yin could threaten him with. Anyone who could cultivate to Elder Big Drum's level had to have a firm will, just like how Lu Yin had not been willing to give anything more than what he had been given in the warehouse. He had only given Elder Big Drum what was within his authority, and anything more was impossible. Furthermore, Lu Yin was clear about his own situation, and he did not have any backing from the Hall of Honor. Master Yuan admired him, but he was not someone that Lu Yin could rely on, so he could not be too arrogant. Elder Big Drum avoided Yu Mu and spoke in a grave tone. Alliance Master Lu, the Astral River's energy is rapidly declining, and the Innerverse and Outerverse are about to connect. It is not wise to make an enemy out of Shamrock Enterprises at this time. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1026. Lu Yin was curious. Is it related to the President Yi you mentioned? Elder Big Drum replied, Yi Wang, the founder of Shamrock Enterprises. The Daoist clan? Lu Yin's gaze turned cold. Elder Big Drum shook his head. Yi as in leaves. Oh. Lu Yin understood. If it really was the Daoist clan, then he would destroy Shamrock Enterprises in the Outerverse. Alliance leader Lu Yiwang is not a simple person. He founded Shamrock Enterprises and expanded his business from the Innerverse to the Outerverse, then to the Cosmic Sea and finally to the Neoverse. There are very few people in the history of the universe who have been able to reach this stage. He has lived for a very long time and has always been in a deep slumber. No one dares to disturb him, but he will wake up every once in a while. Even the Hall of Honor does not want to offend him. It would be unwise to make an enemy out of him, Elder Big Drum advised. Lu Yin replied, I don't want to make an enemy out of Shamrock Enterprises. I just want Yumu to apologize. Elder Big Drum replied, I can help you fight for that, but I hope that this matter will end here. This is for your own good. You've offended many people in the Innerverse, and you are the Hall of Honor's solution. We don't want you to suffer any losses. Lu Yin's anger had mostly dissipated after the battle, and he was not a petty person. How about this? Let him apologize to Enya and we'll let this matter rest. Elder Big Drum nodded. I'll talk to him. When Elder Big Drum appeared, Enya was the most indignant. It was not because Elder Big Drum could mediate between her and Yumu, but because she would not be able to get Yumu to apologize for insulting Shui Chuanxiao. Shui Chuanxiao had intentionally lost the battle and caused half of the Endless Weave to fall into the hands of the technocracy. This was the judgment of the Hall of Honor. If they forced Yumu to apologize for insulting Shui Chuanxiao in front of Elder Big Drum, then it would be equivalent to slapping the Hall of Honor in the face. Lu Yin walked over to Enya and she hurriedly said, Your Highness, we can't bring up Commander Shui's matter. Lu Yin nodded. I know. We'll talk about this later. Yumu was not someone who would willingly accept such humiliation. Perhaps he would apologize under Elder Bigu's coercion, but he would definitely harbor a grudge against Yumu. Lu Yin could already imagine the friction between him and Yumu in the future, but he was not in a hurry. He could deal with this matter in the future. He could be rational enough to give up some benefits for the sake of the big picture, but he could not be rational enough to give up his dignity for the sake of the big picture. He had to pay back the humiliation that Yumu had given him, even if it meant having another enemy in the future. No one knew what Elder Big Drum said, but not long after, Yumu glared at Lu Yin and Enya. He gritted his teeth and said, I apologize for what happened before. Enya clenched her fists and slowly loosened them. President, you will meet again if fate wills it. He then nodded at Elder Big Drum and left with Enya in his collapsible spacecraft. Yumu took a few deep breaths as he watched the spaceship disappear into the sky. His eyes were filled with unwillingness. Elder Daegu came to his side. If King Yi knew about what happened today, he would definitely have a whole new level of respect for you. Not everyone has the courage to apologize. Yumu replied in a low voice. This brat showed off his abilities and courted death. Elder Big Drum looked at him. Even if he courted death, it shouldn't have come from you, and it definitely shouldn't have come from Shamrock Enterprises. King Yi has always been on good terms with my Hall of Honor, and Lu Yin is our Hall of Honor's solution. You should know what that means, and his background involves the Adjudicator. Yumu closed his eyes. Elder Big Drum's last sentence was the true reason for his apology. This Lu Yin was related to the Adjudicator, and the Adjudicator was a peak existence in the human domain. Yumu did not dare to provoke him. I'll take my leave as well. I hope that today's matter will end here and that both sides will not pursue the matter further, Elder Big Drum said tiredly. Yumu turned around and left without even saying goodbye. Elder Big Drum frowned. If not for King Yi, then this Yumu would not have been qualified for Elder Big Drum to mediate. Lu Yin was completely capable of eliminating this person. Elder Big Drum felt a headache coming on when he thought about Lu Yin. He had a premonition that he would have to mediate even more matters for this person in the future. This time it was Shamrock Enterprises. Hopefully the next time it would not be in existence like the Mavis Bank. That was a colossus in the Neoverse, and it was not something that Elder Big Drum could mediate. After leaving Shamrock Enterprises headquarters, Lu Yin and Enya boarded a collapsible spacecraft and headed towards Shenwu continent. He felt a deep sense of guilt towards Ming Yan as they only met once in a while. However, this was the norm for cultivators. They did not care about life or death, and any random seclusion could last for years or even decades. Lu Yin had already done a very good job. Among the younger generation, whether it was the 10 arbiters, the Realmlings, or the experts on the top 100 rankings, very few people dated and even fewer married. One reason was that the higher one's cultivation grew, the higher the bloodline innate gift. Another reason was that cultivators were different from ordinary people. They enjoyed status that ordinary people could not reach, but they also had to endure loneliness that ordinary people could not understand. It was nighttime on Shenwu continent, and Lu Yin tore through the void and walked out of Mingdu's imperial palace. He was greeted by a pair of jade-white palms. It's me. Ming Yan's palms stopped and she looked at Lu Yin in shock. Her brows rose. How dare you appear in my bedroom? You're courting death. Be careful that I don't bury you. Lu Yin pursed his lips. This was White Inventor Yan. Right, it was already dark, so White Inventor Yan had come out. This Ming Yan was not easy to communicate with. Yan, why don't you go to sleep first and Brother Lu will come back tomorrow? Lu Yin asked carefully. He then turned to leave. The white-haired Ming Yan snorted. Stop right there. Lu Yin paused and then laughed dryly. Yan, is something the matter? Ming Yan stared at Lu Yin coldly. I heard that you died. That's just a rumor. Is that so? What a pity. Lu Yin was speechless. What happened? Tell me, the white-haired Ming Yan said coldly, and there was a bone-chilling look in her eyes. This was not directed at Lu Yin, but at the person who had caused his death. It was a coldness that Lu Yin had never felt before. Lu Yin's heart warmed. Regardless of whether it was the white-haired Ming Yan or the black-haired Ming Yan, they were both Ming Yan and the people he loved. Although the white-haired Ming Yan had a cold appearance and bore the burden of Ming Yan's loneliness and sadness, her feelings had not changed. She was just not good at expressing herself and preferred to hide her feelings. The night quickly passed and Lu Yin told the white-haired Ming Yan about the war in the Innerverse as well as the fight for the general appointment platform. However, he did not mention anything about Night King Zhenwu as Ming Yan did not need to worry about him. The white-haired Ming Yan still wanted to know the reason behind Lu Yin's death, and Lu Yin had no choice but to tell her that it was a rumor created by Wang Wen. The white-haired Ming Yan's gaze was cold as she muttered Wang Wen's name. Lu Yin pursed his lips and secretly apologized to Wang Wen. Wang Wen might have to suffer because of this matter in the future. They chatted for the entire night and Lu Yin tried his best to take advantage of her. Surprisingly, the white-haired Ming Yan did not reject him, and she kept saying that she would bury him, but she did not do anything extreme. This made Lu Yin excited and he felt that the future was filled with light and passion. The white-haired Ming Yan and the black-haired Ming Yan seemed very interesting. The night passed and Lu Yin watched as Ming Yan's white hair turned black. He hugged her, startling her, and she turned back to her white hair as she glared at him. Lu Yin laughed dryly and retreated a few steps. How impudent! I'll really bury you! The white-haired Ming Yan shouted. Lu Yin did not move. The white-haired Ming Yan snorted and slowly turned back to her black-haired self. When the black-haired Ming Yan completely appeared, Lu Yin could not help but hug her again. The black-haired Ming Yan hugged him back, her eyes red. Brother Lu Yin thought that you were really dead. Lu Yin hurriedly apologized. The black-haired Ming Yan's emotions fluctuated greatly, and she kept complaining about how much she missed him. Lu Yin kept comforting her. Brother Lu, you should marry Yan, Ming Yan whispered bashfully, burying her head in Lu Yin's chest. Lu Yin's heart swayed and he gazed at her beautiful face before lowering his head to kiss her. After a long while, Ming Yan looked up and met Lu Yin's eyes. Her gaze suddenly turned gloomy and bitter. Brother Lu, you're not willing? Lu Yin sighed. Yan, I really did almost die this time. Ming Yan's heart trembled and her face turned pale. Lu Yin told her the entire story of the struggle, with the main focus being Night King Zhenwu. He did not want Ming Yan to be worried, but he also did not want to marry her at this time. Even if he wanted to marry her, he would have to deal with the hidden danger that was the Day-Night clan and completely stabilize his position in the universe. He loved Ming Yan and he did not want her to suffer another blow. Ming Zhaoxu's death had made Ming Yan want to die. She was afraid that the same thing would happen again and that there would not be a third Ming Yan. Ming Yan's fists turned white as she listened to Lu Yin's story, and her entire body trembled. She had almost lost her most important family. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became and her hair turned from black to white. Lu Yin hurriedly hugged her. Yan, don't think too much. I'm fine. I have someone protecting me so nothing will happen. I promise you that I'll marry you once I deal with the Day-Night clan, okay? Ming Yan's trembling gradually calmed down, and she curled up in Lu Yin's embrace. It took a while for her to calm down, but her gaze had changed as if she had made some sort of decision. Lu Yin did not see Ming Yan's gaze and he only thought that she was worried and angry for him. I'm fine, Brother Lu, Ming Yan said gently as she caressed Lu Yin's face. Lu Yin heaved a sigh of relief and hugged her tightly. Yan, I promise you that nothing will happen again, okay? Ming Yan grunted in acknowledgement and smiled sweetly. Brother Lu, accompany me for a stroll in the garden. Lu Yin nodded. Shenwu continent was sealed off by the 5 sealing planets, and Lu Yin had guessed that the 5 sealing planets were a sourcebox array. He had no idea what was hidden within such a huge sourcebox. The only other person who knew of this secret was Ming Yan. Lu Yin had told her not to tell anyone about Gu Yu, as even he would not be able to prevent Shenwu continent from being destroyed. Just the lock breakers alone would be enough to tear apart Shenwu continent for research purposes. Lu Yin had only planned to stay on Shenwu continent for a few days to accompany Ming Yan, but Ming Yan had insisted that he stay for 10 more days. 10 days later he left Shenwu continent. Ming Yan looked at the empty garden and raised her head. Brother Lu, I can't let you experience life and death alone. Shenwu continent is too small and I can't help you. Her gaze was resolute as she spoke. Chapter 1027. After leaving Shenwu continent, Lu Yin had Enya contact the Great Eastern Alliance to send a Radiant-grade spacecraft to Broken Blade Fort in Iron Blood Weave. He wanted to make a trip to Iron Blood Weave. Before the Innerverse and Outerverse were reconnected, Lu Yin needed to unify the Outerverse. This was no longer something that he could decide, as it was something that was bound to happen. When the time came, the various great powers of the Innerverse would definitely not agree and conflicts would erupt. Lu Yin had not thought of a way to resolve this conflict, but dealing with the Day-Night clan could not be delayed. The contest for the Star Tower was about to begin, and if possible, Lu Yin wanted to deal with Night King Zhenwu before he became one of the 5 astral children. Otherwise, taking revenge would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. There was still a group of Day-Night clansmen left in the Outerverse, and Lu Yin was going to take them away. These people had made great contributions in protecting Iron Blood Weave, so Lu Yin would not do anything to them. However, he could not leave them alone in the Outerverse either. Against a colossus like the Day-Night clan, even the slightest mistake could be fatal. A few days later, Lu Yin sighed with emotion as he gazed at the enormous Broken Blade Fort in the distance. Who would have thought that after so many years he would no longer be an insignificant person who had been randomly assigned to his post? Even Elder Nuohua of Iron Blood We've had to treat him with respect. The traces of the battle still remained, but it had only been a few years. The overall commander of Broken Blade Fort was Han Fei, an enlightener. Lu Yin's arrival shook Broken Blade Fort, but only a portion of the people were shocked. The majority of the people did not pay much attention to his arrival. After all, this was Iron Blood Weave, and although Broken Blade Fort had joined the Great Eastern Alliance in name, that was only in name. Iron Blood Weave and the current Southern Weave were unique in the Outerverse, and no one dared to act impudently here. Night Queen Chuyu was at Iron Blood Fort, so Lu Yin headed there directly. Elder Nuha had not expected Lu Yin's sudden arrival, and he immediately contacted Lu Yin. When he found out that Lu Yin's goal was to take Night Queen Chuyu and the others away, his expression changed. Alliance Master Lu, no matter what enmity you have with the Day-Night clan, Night Queen Chuyu and the others have contributed greatly to Iron Blood Weave. We cannot allow you to take them away as you wish. Lu Yin replied, Don't worry, Elder. I don't plan on doing anything to them, but I will restrict their freedom. Impossible. Elder Nua's tone was stern. Ever since he had seen the blood-red bell, he had been very respectful towards Lu Yin, but what Lu Yin was about to do now had crossed his bottom line. Lu Yin frowned. He had known that it would be a little troublesome to take Night Queen Chuyu and the others away, but he had not expected Elder Nuohua to be so resolute. Alliance Master Lu, you should be clear about the rules of Iron Blood Weave. All grudges from the outside world cannot be brought in here. Anyone who attacks a comrade here will be considered a traitor to humanity, and I'm sure you don't want to bear such a crime, Elder Novar said in a deep voice. Lu Yin's eyes flashed as he had forgotten that there was such a rule in Iron Blood Weave. This was going to be troublesome. If he didn't take these people with him, then if a war with the Day-Night clan broke out, these people would become a huge problem for him. The average strength of the Innerverse cultivators far exceeded that of the Outerverse cultivators. Furthermore, the Day-Night clan even had people like Night Queen Chuyu. Lu Yin thought about it for a moment before looking at Elder Noah. Elder, can you promise this junior something? Something that is within the scope of an elder's authority and won't be out of line? When Elder Nuohua saw that Lu Yin did not intend to continue attacking, he secretly relaxed as he really did not want to offend this person. Please speak, Alliance Master Lu. Lu Yin explained, the war in the Innerverse has already ended, and the Sixth Mainland's invasion of the Innerverse was unsuccessful. It's very likely that they've shifted their focus to the Astral Beast domain. After all, the Innerverse and Outerverse have been separated, and they can invade the Outerverse from the Astral Beast domain. Outerverse? What nonsense. Elder Nuohua really wanted to say this. If the Sixth Mainland wanted to invade the Outerverse, why would they need to go through the Astral Beast domain? They could just go through the technocracy and save time and effort. The people of the Sixth Mainland are no different from those of the Fifth Mainland. To prevent the Sixth Mainland from invading the Outerverse through the Astral Beast domain and to prevent the Sixth Mainland from sending people to steal information about the situation at the border, I, Lu Yin, as the commander of the Outerverse Allied Forces, will seal off Ironblood Weave. Only people are allowed to enter and not leave, and no information is allowed to be sent out. They will only be able to transmit information about the situation at the border. Elder, this request is not too much, right? Lu Yin asked. Elder Nuohua nodded. It's fine. After all, the border's security is of utmost importance. Thank you, Elder. Lu Yin smiled. His goal was to seal off the movements of Night Queen Chuyu and the others, and now he could seal off the entire Ironblood Weave as well. Elder Nuohua knew Lu Yin's goal, but it did not matter to him. Whether or not Ironblood Weave was sealed off did not affect him in any way. Besides, Lu Yin was the commander of the Outerverse Allied Forces, so he had the authority to issue such an order. Elder Nuohua did not need to bear the consequences. However, why did Lu Yin want to seal off the movements of Night Queen Chuyu and the others? Could it be? Elder Nuohua's expression changed as this was too bold. Was Lu Yin even qualified? Had he truly seen through the Day-Night clan? Not long after Lu Yin left Ironblood Fort, Elder Nuohua issued an order to seal off the entire Ironblood Weave. This order caused quite a commotion within Ironblood Weave, especially Night Queen Chuyu and the others. The Innerverse and Outerverse were about to be reconnected, so wouldn't sealing off Ironblood Weave be the same as cutting off their path back home? Night Queen Chuyu immediately contacted Elder Nuohua, but she received a firm answer. The Sixth Mainland's invasion concerns the survival of the entire human domain. Once the Innerverse and Outerverse are reconnected, the Innerverse will continue to send reinforcements to Ironblood Weave. You should all remain in Ironblood Weave for the time being, Elder Nuohua calmly stated. Night Queen Chuyu was dissatisfied. We've already been guarding Ironblood Weave for several years. It's time for a new group of people. No matter what Night Queen Chuyu said, Elder Nuohua did not agree. Night Queen Chuyu was helpless. Elder, you can seal off Ironblood Weave, but why are you sealing off the transmission of information? Elder Nuohua was dissatisfied. There are still survivors from the Sixth Mainland in the Outerverse. If they steal information, how do you expect me to answer to the Hall of Honor? Alright, I don't need to explain myself to you. If you're still dissatisfied, you can send a request to the Hall of Honor. He then hung up. Night Queen Chuyu was furious, but there was nothing she could do. The same thing happened in the various major forts of Ironblood Weave. Duke Blackhawk from the Ross Empire, Poison Flame from the Blaze Realm, Sun Chong from the Sun family, Featherwing Grace from the Graceful Mercenary Group, and so on were all forcefully held back. When they would be released depended on when the seal on Ironblood Weave would be lifted. Night Queen Chuyu and the others would never have dreamed that they would be forced to stay because of a single sentence from Lu Yin. This insignificant person who they had once looked down on and could crush at any time, was now someone who could influence them with just a single sentence. Aside from these major figures, there were also many others who were implicated, such as Long Yun Sharon and the others. Some had originally planned to take advantage of the fact that there was no war in Ironblood Weave to gain some military merits, but they were forcefully held back. Lu Yin could not touch the people of Ironblood Weave, so he could only think of a way to seal them off. However, he had ordered the Alliance's army to capture all of the Innerverse cultivators who had been mining pyrolite in the Astral Wilderness. As for the pyrolite mining, it would be taken over by the Great Yu Empire. Lu Yin left Ironblood Weave and boarded a Radiant-grade spacecraft. Yu was waiting on board. Not long after the spacecraft left Ironblood Weave, someone contacted Lu Yin. It was Amu. Ever since Umbral Butterfly Weave had joined the Great Eastern Alliance, Lu Yin and Amu had not contacted each other. Greetings, Alliance Master Lu. Amu's attitude was respectful and his expression was reserved. Lu Yin smiled. You're welcome. Amu, what's the matter? Amu hesitated and then slowly said, Seventh bro, no, Alliance Master Lu, do you still remember what you promised me? Lu Yin thought about it. Are you talking about obtaining Angie? Amu's eyes lit up. Yes. Lu Yin had a strange expression. Do you really like her? Amu did not hesitate. Yes, I really do. Lu Yin laughed. Amu, how many times have you interacted with Wei Rong? Amu was stunned as he did not understand why Lu Yin had suddenly brought up Wei Rong. Young matriarch Angie's interactions with Wei Rong almost always involve me. Then do you think that he wouldn't be able to tell if you liked Angie? Lu Yin slowly asked. Amu's expression changed. Seventh bro, it's because I hid it well. If Wei Rong knew that I liked Angie, he would definitely destroy me. Lu Yin looked at Amu with interest. He would be an idiot if he believed Amu. Amu had allowed Wei Rong to obtain Angie. If he truly liked her, then it would be impossible for any man to not have any emotional fluctuations. Wei Rong would have been able to sense any emotional fluctuations, and the fact that Amu hadn't been able to sense them only meant one thing. Amu had never liked Angie. However, Lu Yin did not intend to expose Amu. The umbral butterfly weave is an unstable factor. Amu, I need you to continue hiding and not expose yourself. I promise you that Angie will not belong to anyone else. Amu was delighted. Thank you, seventh bro. Stay with the umbral butterfly tribe for a period of time. Alright, I still have things to do. Lu Yin did not wait for Amu to finish speaking before ending the call. He then stared at his gadget with a gloomy expression. There was a message from Luo Shen. It contained 2 words and a set of coordinates. Save me. Lu Yin immediately tried to contact Luo Shen, but he could not reach her no matter how hard he tried. He quickly contacted the old smoker, as Luo Shen's protection was taken over by the 2nd Squadron. Contact the person protecting Luo Shen, Lu Yin said. After a minute, the old smoker sent back a message. Unable to contact them. Lu Yin's heart sank and he ordered his spacecraft to return to Xenu Star. He then boarded a collapsible spacecraft and headed towards the coordinates that Luo Shen had given him. The coordinates were not far from where he was, and it would only take him a few hours to reach it. In the east of Iron Blood Weave, near the border between the human domain and the astral beast domain, there was a planet. From outer space, it looked as if the entire planet had been split in half, and an unknown white substance was spreading out from both sides. On the planet, Luo Shen panted heavily as she struggled to escape. Blades would occasionally slash her and her pure white feet were drenched in blood. The star energy around her body was unstable. Abandoned buildings lined both sides of the planet and from time to time, people would call for help or cry out in despair. The planet had been fine the day before, but today it had become the end of the world. Everything had happened too quickly, and of the hundreds of millions of people on the planet, more than half had turned into zombies that massacred the humans. The survivors were all running for their lives. She was a melder and could have easily dealt with these zombies, but for some reason over 100 corpse kings had descended from the sky. These were corpse kings that possessed the ability to evolve. They were strange life forms that could obtain innate gifts by consuming energy crystals, and they could even gain intelligence. Chapter 1028. Usually, an apocalyptic planet would only give birth to 2 or 3 corpse kings, but so many had suddenly descended on this planet. Each one was at least as strong as a sentinel and some even had the strength of a Lemeter. The 2nd Squadron that had been protecting her had been slaughtered by a Lemeter corpse king. She had been on the run for an entire day and her star energy was unstable. She couldn't even fly. Several Melder corpse kings chased after her, all of them possessing innate gifts and knowing how to surround her. With a bang, the building crumbled as a corpse king pierced through it, lifting a woman up and tearing her apart. Fresh blood sprayed out and dyed the sky red. Luoshen's face was deathly pale and her eyes were filled with intense fear. She had seen this scene too many times in the past 10 hours, but every time she saw it she felt a deep sense of despair. She would soon be torn apart like that woman. A foul stench filled the air and Luoshen was alarmed. She instinctively dodged, but a corpse king swept past her. This Corpse King's innate gift was speed and only it could catch up to her. Luotian dodged but she crashed into a wall and fell through it into the room. A few Corpse Kings rushed in and slammed down with their rotting claws. Luotian's eyes narrowed. He was done for. The ground suddenly split open, and an intense white heat wave surged out and swallowed the Corpse Kings. Luotian almost fell down, but fortunately she managed to land on a rock and jump back up. The planet was on the verge of collapse and it split open from the middle. Luotian walked out of the building and looked into the distance. She saw that the city had been split in half, and there was a huge hole in the middle that was hundreds of meters long. White lava was gushing out from the ground and it was hotter than red lava. It was so hot that even an explorer would not be able to withstand it. She closed her eyes and recalled Lu Yin's appearance. It was over. Even if she didn't die at the hands of the Corpse Kings, she would be swallowed by the planet and turned to dust. But that was fine as well, as being turned to dust was better than being eaten by the Corpse Kings. Luotian tossed her gadget aside. A few hours ago she had been lucky enough to send a signal to Lu Yin, but it was clearly too late. The entire city was collapsing and she would soon be burned to ashes along with it. She regretted sending a message to Lu Yin. Dying like this would be one more thing to worry about. Perhaps he had never remembered her. The city fell and many people howled in despair at the top of the buildings. The zombies' roars and the Corpse King's chewing sounds filled the scene with a hellish scene. A Lemeter Luotian and Luotian's body's body. Luotian and a bloodthirsty look to tear her head. Luotian's body's Luotian's to die. Just as she was about to fall, her body was embraced by a pair of strong arms. Her entire body was lifted into the air, and she heard the voice she had been waiting for a long time. You would have turned into ashes if I was a step late. I didn't expect you to have such a strong personality. Luotian excitedly opened her eyes and saw Lu Yin hugging her. She muttered to herself, "Am I dead? It's because I'm dead that I can see you. If you were alive I wouldn't have been able to see you," Luotian whispered. Luotian. To Luotian. Earth Luotian. The Lemeter Corpse King leaped up and swiped at Lu Yin with its claws. Lu Yin's gaze turned cold and he flicked his finger. His strength transformed into a gale that tore through the void. The void not only crushed the Lemeter Corpse King, but it also pierced through the city and destroyed a large wave of zombies along the way. Luotian looked down and saw that the entire city was about to sink into white lava. "Your Highness, please save the city. There are still many people alive." Lu Yin nodded and pressed down with one hand. His star energy transformed into a giant palm that lifted up the entire city. Even a Lemeter could lift up an entire city, let alone Lu Yin. Saving these people would be as easy as lifting a finger. His domain whisked past and spread throughout the city. All of the zombies and Corpse Kings were killed. Lu Yin sighed. Only a few tens of thousands of people had survived in this huge city. This scene was all too familiar. Earth had seen similar scenes at the beginning of Armageddon, but it had been much better and far less cruel. Only zombies and Corpse Kings that had evolved normally had appeared during Earth's apocalypse. However, there were even Lemeter Corpse Kings here and all of them had come from the same direction. As he thought about it, Lu Yin turned to look towards the east, where a majestic amount of rune lines soared into the sky. These rune lines belonged to Enlighters and there was an Enlighter Corpse King here. Lu Yin put Luotian down and his expression turned serious. "Be careful. I need to take care of something." Luotian was worried. "Is there trouble?" Lu Yin put on his universal armor. "It's a small matter." He then tore through the void and disappeared. The next moment he reappeared at the peak of a burning mountain tens of thousands of kilometers away. In front of him was an Enlighter Corpse King. "You're courting death." Lu Yin's gaze turned cold as he put on the giant's right arm and punched out. "I've been looking for you for a long time, Neo-Human Alliance." There was a loud bang as a shockwave exploded and shattered the mountain range. The shockwaves tore through space and spread out into the universe. The Enlighter Corpse King was sent flying, and the right half of its body was shattered. It stared at Lu Yin in disbelief. "No, impossible." Lu Yin was cold and arrogant. Even Yumu did not dare to take his giant's right arm head-on. It had been upgraded to the point where it could threaten a powerhouse with a power level of over 400,000. How could an Enlighter Corpse King with a power level of over 200,000 withstand it? Even if the Corpse King's physical body was extremely powerful, it could not possibly reach the power level of 400,000. Lu Yin suddenly charged forward and reached out with his right arm. He wanted to grab the Corpse King. The Corpse King's scarlet eyes were savage, and it leapt into outer space to escape. Lu Yin snorted. In terms of speed, with his physical body strength, he was definitely not any slower than the Corpse King. The Corpse King crossed its arms and strange patterns appeared in the void as it tried to push Lu Yin away. This was an innate gift, but Lu Yin simply waved his right arm and used his absolute strength to disperse the patterns before reaching out again. Just as Lu Yin was about to grab the Corpse King roared, "Lu Yin, there will be a day when you will pay the price for offending the Neo-Human Alliance." His abdomen swelled up and then exploded. Lu Yin's expression changed and he viciously slashed out with his right arm. An enormous force tore through the void and tore a huge hole in it. The spatial tear absorbed the Corpse King's explosion and it did not harm the planet. Although the planet was on the verge of destruction, there were still people on it, so it could not be destroyed so quickly. At that moment, a golden light entered Lu Yin's eyes. He looked over and his eyes lit up. Was that true insight? During the lockbreaker competition, the prize for the true insight had been taken away by Deng Pu during the Great Battle on Source Peak Planet, and he had then sold it to the Zhou family. The Battle of Million Cities had started with the true insight page being stolen by a Corpse King. That had led to the Battle of Million Cities, which had shaken the entire Outerverse, and it had also exposed the fact that Million Cities was a war fortress. Countless people had fought intensely over that page of true insight, and in the end, it had disappeared without a trace. When Lu Yin had been ambushed by the Neo-Human Alliance, he had thought that one of the Corpse Kings that had attacked him had been the one that had stolen true insight. However, the Corpse King had been destroyed, and true insight's whereabouts were still unknown. He had never expected that true insight would appear here. Could this be the same Corpse King that had stolen true insight from the Zhou family? However, this was not important as he already had 5 pages of true insight and now he had an additional page. The entire true insight of the Outerverse had been obtained by him, and this excited Lu Yin. As long as he broke through to become a boundless advanced lockbreaker, he would be able to study these pages. He was looking forward to learning more about sourcebox arrays. During the battle at the Cosmic Sea, if not for the sourcebox arrays, Not Kong would not have been able to defeat Supreme the Arch and the other 4 powerhouses. In the Innerverse, it was also Qiu Shi who had relied on her sourcebox arrays to toss out Captain Point Daoist and force Not Kong to retreat. Sourcebox arrays possessed terrifying might, and they were not inferior to secret techniques. Lu Yin glanced at the sky for a moment before returning to his planet. Not long after Lu Yin left, strange patterns appeared at the spot where the Corpse King had exploded. They spiraled around and then condensed together. Because Lu Yin had used the giant's right arm to tear through space, the remnant energy contained a large amount of rune lines, which was why he had not noticed these strange patterns condensing. On the planet, Zhou Xian was rescuing the trapped survivors. With her strength as a melder, she was able to push open buildings, so her rescue efficiency was quite high. Lu Yin returned and swept out with his domain, which then transformed into a towering tree. Its branches spread throughout the entire city and rescued all of the survivors. Many of the survivors knelt down in worship, as Lu Yin was a god in their eyes. This planet was like many other planets in the universe that did not have a cultivation civilization, so Lu Yin's actions were no different from that of a god. Lu Yin did not explain any further and planned to leave with Zhou Xian. There was still some time before this planet was destroyed, and the nearest Great Eastern Alliance army was not far away. He could leave the rest to them. Zhou Xian could not bear it. "Your Highness, let's save them." Lu Yin replied, "Don't worry, the army will be here soon." Zhou Xian pursed her lips. Lu Yin asked, "Why are you here?" Zhou Xian replied, "This is the edge of the Outerverse weaves. I wanted to promote the alliance, but I was captured by the Neo-Human Alliance and thrown onto this planet." Lu Yin did not understand Zhou Xian's work, but he did not ask. He took out a collapsible spacecraft and was about to bring her up when strange patterns gathered in the void to form a ray of reddish-black light that shot towards Lu Yin. This ray of light arrived very quickly, but fortunately, Lu Yin had already seen the rune lines descending and was prepared. He immediately put on his universal armor, and the remnant power of this Corpse King's innate gift was not enough to harm him. However, no matter how much he had calculated, he had not expected Luo Shan to be right next to him. She had also seen the ray of light before he had, and she had not hesitated to block the attack for him. Luo Shan suddenly appeared in front of him and crashed into the ray of reddish-black light. By the time Lu Yin reacted, the ray had already struck her. Lu Yin was shocked and he pressed a palm against her back. Star energy passed through her body and blocked the ray of light's corrosion. The reddish-black light was just the remnant power of the Corpse King's innate gift after it had died, and it could be considered one of its innate gifts. Since it was a remnant power, its power would not be too great. Lu Yin could have blocked it without his universal armor, but Luo Shan could not. Thank you. The Mountain Breeze brother, the rest of my life will only be for you. Thanks for your support. Thanks for your support. Thank you for your support. Chapter 1029. Lu Yin's reaction was quick, but he still couldn't stop the red and black light from piercing through Luo Shan's body. Although he'd managed to block some of the power, Luo Shan was only a melder. Her body was as fragile as paper against this attack. Lu Yin grabbed Luo Shan and pulled her into his embrace, causing the reddish-black light to dissipate. Luo Shan's face was pale and bloodless. Large amounts of blood flowed out of her abdomen. Ever since he had stepped onto the path of cultivation, no one had ever done such a thing. Luo Shan was dying in his place. At this moment, Ming Yan, Zhou Xian, and Luo Shan overlapped. In order to prevent him from being threatened by the Neo-Human Alliance, Ming Yan had willingly eaten the poison and died. In order to give Lu Yin a chance to escape, Zhou Xian had purposely revealed Night's End, daybreak, in order to obstruct Night King Jinwu. As for Luo Shan, she did not hesitate to stand in front of him and die for him. Lu Yin had never imagined that he would encounter such a scene. He hugged Luo Shan and felt an indescribable weight. He hurriedly fed Luo Shan some pills and used his lock-breaking techniques to dissolve the power that was eroding Luo Shan's body. Luo Shan's abdomen had been struck, and it had almost been pierced through. The corrosive power continued to spread, but fortunately Lu Yin was a lock-breaker. Otherwise he would not have been able to control it. Blood continued to flow as Lu Yin held onto Luo Shan, his face pale. Luo Shan had already fainted. "Seventh bro, don't panic. Her injuries aren't that serious. That power wasn't that strong in the first place and it's been greatly weakened by you." The monkey shouted. Lu Yin was shocked. "Weakened?" Yes, his eyes transformed into runes as he stared at Luo Shan's abdomen. The power that was corroding her body was directly weakened by the rune lines, and a small portion of the power that was corroding Luo Shan's body was weakened. Lu Yin heaved a sigh of relief as he could now control the situation. He got up and carried Goddess Luo into the collapsible spaceship. He looked for the nearest Shamrock Enterprises and left quickly. Within the spacecraft, Lu Yin's thoughts were complicated as he looked at Luo Shan's long hair. She was extremely weak. Why did she block that attack for him? Was it worth it? He knew that Luo Shan liked him, whether it was through her eyes or through her words. However, he could not accept it. Ming Yan was his true love, and he also had Wendy Yushan by his side. Wendy had also supported him without hesitation during the battle on planet Pyrolite. There was also Zhou Xian, and he could not repay her kindness. Feelings were heavier than any power. He did not dare to accept Luo Shan's feelings. However, how could he return such a blow? It was also a life and death debt, but this debt was too heavy. And Luo Shan was in pain. Her lips were dry and cracked as she muttered to herself. Lu Yin approached. Your Highness, don't come. Your Highness, leave quickly. Big brother Lu. Lu Yin's gaze was complicated as he looked at Luo Shan's helpless expression. He couldn't help but reach out and grab her pure white hand. It was soft and boneless and it was very comfortable. For some reason, the moment Lu Yin held her hand, Luo Shan calmed down. Although she was in pain, she did not make another sound. There was a clear look of relief on her face. No matter how much pain she was in, she was happy at this moment. Lu Yin fell silent. The pill that Lu Yin had fed Luo Shan was something that had been upgraded by Lu Yin, and it was enough to heal even an enlighter's injuries. However, Luo Shan was only a melder, and he was worried that the Corpse King's power might have side effects. He had to bring her to Shamrock Enterprises for treatment. Although Shamrock Enterprises sold drugs, they were also very capable in terms of treatment. They had many talents in the medical industry. Unfortunately, he didn't know where Windrift Hall was, otherwise Windrift Hall would definitely be a better choice. He had just defended Shamrock Enterprises, and now he was bringing Zhou Xian to their doorstep. He felt a little embarrassed. But he didn't have time to think so much. Yumu couldn't refuse and he wouldn't fall out with Lu Yin over such a small matter. The nearest branch of Shamrock Enterprises was a few hours away, and it wasn't far from Frostwave Weave. Lu Yin tyrannically stopped Shamrock Enterprises' research and development of drugs and gathered all of the medical professionals to treat Zhou Xian. After finding out that her injuries were completely under control and that all she needed to do was quietly recuperate, Lu Yin let them go. After all, Zhou Xian was only a melder. Although Lu Yin's pill had managed to control her injuries, the medicine's effects were overbearing and had caused some damage to her body as well. Shamrock Enterprises needed to help her recover. And this recovery would take at least half a year. A few days later, Zhou Xian woke up. She still held on to Lu Yin's hand and he didn't let go of her either. When she opened her eyes and saw that she was holding on to Lu Yin's hand, she blushed, but she didn't let go immediately and pretended not to notice. Lu Yin asked with concern, "Are you thirsty?" Zhou Xian was very thirsty, but she still shook her head. She was afraid that Lu Yin would let go if he poured her some water. She would rather stay thirsty. Lu Yin was puzzled. "You're not thirsty? Your lips are chapped." "No," she said stubbornly, her voice a little hoarse. Lu Yin grunted and lowered his head. Their hands were still clasped and he subconsciously let go. "Sorry, you were unconscious and I didn't want to disturb you." Zhou Xian was disappointed and whispered, "I'm thirsty." Lu Yin pursed his lips, speechless. What did she mean? He poured her a cup of water and she drank it all before handing it back to him with an expectant gaze. Lu Yin poured her another cup but she still drank it all. He poured her another cup and she drank half of it this time. Her complexion clearly improved. "And you're still saying you're not thirsty?" Zhou Xian rolled her eyes slightly but her face was still red. "Right, thank you," Lu Yin said with a heavy tone. Zhou Xian shook her head. "If it wasn't for your highness, I would have definitely been punished by the Amethyst Trading Company. This is my way of repaying you." Repaying? Although Lu Yin didn't know much about relationships, he still understood her intentions. "Your Highness, where are we?" she asked. "A branch of Shamrock Enterprises." "My injuries?" Zhou Xian was confused. Lu Yin replied, "It's fine, I'll be fine after half a year of rest. Don't do such things again." Zhou Xian nodded and muttered to herself, "As long as you're not in danger." Lu Yin didn't hear her clearly. "What did you say?" "Nothing," she hurriedly replied. Lu Yin stood up. "I'll go ask how that planet is doing." Zhou Xian grunted and watched Lu Yin leave. She looked down at her abdomen. It hurt but her heart felt warm. "Your Highness, the decline of the astral river's energy is accelerating, and the surrounding star energy is surging. Many people have gone to cultivate," Xianxia reported. Lu Yin looked towards the south. "Got it. Take the people from Yu Academy to cultivate." "Yes, Your Highness," Xianxia replied. Lu Yin put down his gadget. It seemed that the inner verse and outer verse would be reconnected soon. Before that happened, he would definitely unify the outer verse and become the master of the outer verse. The various powers of the inner verse would never agree and conflict would definitely erupt. He still hadn't thought of a way to resolve this matter, but what was to come would come and he couldn't avoid it. Perhaps it would be good to go to the edge of the astral river. After accompanying Zhou Xian for 2 more days, Lu Yin decided to leave on the 3rd day. The ground inexplicably trembled and a howling gale almost flipped the ground over. Lu Yin's gaze turned cold and he walked out of the ward. He raised a hand and used his star energy to form a barrier that blocked the gale. He then looked into the distance, where he saw an even greater number of rune lines than the Enlighter Corp's king. There was an Enlighter there. Why was he running into Enlighters everywhere he went? In the distance, the Shamrock Enterprises branch building trembled and the mountain range cracked open. Many Shamrock Enterprises cultivators fled as they stared in horror at the giant figure standing beside the mountain range. It was a Sylvan dragon. No one had expected a Sylvan dragon to attack a Shamrock Enterprises branch. Most importantly, the Sylvan dragon had covered its face with a piece of black cloth. Everyone who saw this had a strange look in their eyes. Who couldn't tell that it was a Sylvan dragon? Was there any point in covering its face? Even if it didn't cover its face, no one would be able to tell the dragon's appearance apart from its gender. If it wanted to hide its identity, why didn't it change its skeletal structure and assume a human form? There were many strange things in the Outerverse history, and today there was one more. A masked Sylvan dragon had attacked a Shamrock Enterprises branch, and it even thought that no one would be able to recognize it. This is a robbery. Be honest and hand over your star essence and your best medicine. The dragon roared, spitting saliva all over the place. The terrifying pressure frightened the Shamrock Enterprises staff, and many of the women paled. Some of them even cried out in fear. The Sylvan dragon's large eyes scanned the crowd and fixed on the beautiful women. Its human-like gaze revealed a look of infatuation. This is a robbery. Strip and search. Everyone was stunned. At this moment, a screen appeared in the sky above the branch, and the image of Eastern Frontier's president, Shen Fu, appeared. Your Excellency, how has Shamrock Enterprises offended you? The Sylvan dragon blinked. What Sylvan dragon? You got the wrong person. I'm a phoenix. Everyone was speechless. Shen Fu choked and angrily replied, Your Excellency, I am Shen Fu, the president of Shamrock Enterprises Eastern Frontier. Please enlighten me. How has Shamrock Enterprises offended you? The Sylvan dragon was furious. I already said that I'm a phoenix. Don't you understand bird language? Shen Fu was furious. Don't be so arrogant, Sylvan dragon. This is Shamrock Enterprises, and even if you're the leader of your family, you can't cause trouble for no reason. The Sylvan dragon waved its hand and dispersed the screen. Its large eyes then focused on the beautiful women once more, and its saliva almost dripped from its mouth. Hurry up and let me search you. You must be hiding some good stuff. In the distance, Lu Yin stared blankly at the Sylvan dragon's robbery with a strange expression. Wasn't this guy Long Erwo? They had disappeared after escaping from the Starfall Sea, and he hadn't been captured by Master Yuan? Why was he here? And why was he robbing? At this moment another screen appeared, but this time it was a fish screen. Before Lu Yin could speak, the entire mountain range shook, and the device that had launched the screen was destroyed. The image of the fish screen disappeared. The Sylvan dragon was pleased. How dare you disturb me? You're courting death. Tisk. How bold of you to not listen to me. This is a robbery. Hand over the star essence and the medicine. The males will stand on the left and the females will stand on the right. Bah. Seriously, the males and ugly females will stand on the left and the pretty females will stand on the right. Everyone was terrified and they could only follow the Sylvan dragon's orders. The beautiful women were even more terrified and they looked at the dragon in despair. The Sylvan dragon grinned, revealing its sinister teeth. Now I'll search you. Ah. Baidu Search Dong 81 Chinese Networko. No advertisement. Chapter 1030. In the distance, Lu Yin's gadget beeped. It was Shen Fu. Alliance leader Lu, please help Shamrock Enterprises. I would be eternally grateful, Shen Fu said respectfully. Lu Yin was helpless as he happened to be here. Both Shen Fu and Yu Mu knew that he had just defended Shamrock Enterprises, and now that he had asked them to treat Luoshen, he owed them a favor. Got it. Lu Yin answered and walked out, appearing in the sky in a flash as he put on his universal armor and faced the dragon. Long Erwo, do you remember an old friend? Lu Yin's voice was transmitted directly to the dragon's ears. The dragon was stunned and looked up to meet Lu Yin's gaze. He was confused at first, then dumbfounded and finally furious. You again? You want to ruin my plans? Alright, you've already harmed the Skyfire Dojo once, so I won't let you off this time. Die. Lu Yin slowly put on the giant's right arm and clenched his fist. I killed 2 imprinter during the battle in the astral graveyard. Just as Long Erwo was about to attack, he paused when he heard those words. He remembered that this guy had killed 2 imprinter. They were imprinters with a combat power of over 500,000, and they were from the 6th mainland. This was awkward and Long Erwo didn't dare to attack. He had been roaming the Outerverse for a while and had heard many things about Lu Yin. In particular, no one could compare to Lu Yin when it came to external items. Who knew how many he had? Right, he was also from the Hall of Honor and had Master Yuan as his backer. Long Erwo gulped. It wasn't a tough nut to crack, so there was no need for it to cause trouble. Get lost, kid. This has nothing to do with you. Lu Yin clenched his right fist. I'll take care of this place for now. Long Erwo snarled, kid, don't cause trouble. Lu Yin's eyes narrowed as he transmitted to Long Erwo. You're covering your face because you don't want to offend Shamrock Enterprises. Aren't you afraid that I'll tell you your name? The inner verse and outer verse are about to be connected. Do you want to be hunted down by the entire company? Long Erwo was furious and he unwillingly looked at the ground beneath the mountain range. He then looked at the beautiful women and muttered, I'm a human body researcher and I can tell that these women are sick. I want to treat them. Bong. Lu Yin shouted, giving Erwo a fright. He thought that Lu Yin was about to reveal his name, so he quickly slipped away with his tail between his legs. Kid, I'll remember you. Lu Yin sighed. This Sylvan dragon had no moral integrity at all. Back in the Skyfire dojo, the fire dragon had burned all of the cultivators' clothes, and it was rumored that this dragon had instigated the fire dragon to do so. This was a scum of a dragon, but it was very powerful and its power level was close to 300,000. This was troublesome. With this dragon in the outer verse, there was no lack of trouble. Long Erwo had been chased away by Lu Yin, and the people of Shamrock Enterprises were very grateful. Lu Yin told them to take good care of Luotian before leaving. It had already been a month since Lu Yin had personally gone to Iron Blood Weave. During this time, the biggest news in the outer verse was that a Central Weave had joined the Great Eastern Alliance. This news was shocking but not unexpected. The Great Eastern Alliance's unification of the outer verse was inevitable, but in reality, it could not be considered unification. This was just an alliance and it did not mean that the various great powers would be dissolved. True unification would mean that the various great powers would be dissolved. This was a long process and it was not something that could be accomplished so easily. Even if Lu Yin could live for a long time, he was not interested in such a thing. The alliance was the best choice for him as all he needed was status, authority and resources. At present, 50 of the Outerverse 72 weaves had joined the Great Eastern Alliance, leaving only 22 weaves in the west. Everyone looked towards the west. Lu Yin had just arrived. After entering Frostwave Weave, Enya contacted him and informed him of the current situation. She also confirmed that the remaining weaves would be able to join the alliance within half a year. However, Lu Yin felt that this was too slow and he gave Enya, Wangwen and the others a deadline of 3 months. They had to join the alliance within 3 months, because based on the rate at which the Astral River's energy was declining, the Innerverse and Outerverse would be connected in less than half a year. They had to unite the Outerverse before the Innerverse and Outerverse were connected. Only by uniting all of the Outerverse's power would they be able to strike fear into the Innerverse's great powers and obtain the Hall of Honor's recognition. If they wanted to resist the pressure from the Innerverse, then the Hall of Honor's attitude would be crucial. Next he would enter the Daoist sect's ruins. It had been a long time since he had last entered, and it was time to cultivate his second son. It was not that Lu Yin had not wanted to enter the Daoist sect's ruins, but rather that he had not had the time. After the battle in the Astral Cemetery, he had been thrown into the Cosmic Sea and he had not had the time to do so. It was only now that he had the time to enter the Daoist sect's ruins again. He took out his futon and sat on it. The scene before him changed, and Lu Yin appeared at the Futon Plaza outside the First Divine Gate's ruins. There were even more people at the Futon Plaza than the last time he had been there. The Sixth Mainland had given up on attacking the Innerverse, and the younger generation had all returned, so there were naturally more people here. Several cultivators from the Sixth Mainland had teamed up to challenge the First Divine Gate. Lu Yin scanned his surroundings but he did not find anyone familiar. His footsteps were light and he quickly passed through the gate and headed towards the budding terrace. The cultivators from the First Divine Gate were stunned. There's an expert here and from the looks of it he might be a descendant of an imprinter family. The 3 domains invasion of the human domain failed, and those young experts have all returned. It's impossible for us to peacefully search for opportunities like before. What a pity. The First Divine Gate's guardians had clearly been destroyed, but they had now reappeared. Lu Yin had no idea where they had come from. Lu Yin casually waved his hand, and the First Divine Gate guardians shattered. These First Divine Gate guardians had not even been able to stop him for a second. After passing through the gate, Lu Yin stepped onto the budding terrace. There were more people here than before, and Lu Yin headed straight for the 9 cauldrons space. Lu Yin's group did not leave, and they would not leave until the time was up. Even if the time was up, they would definitely return to this cauldron the next time because they had experienced a cauldron tremor. I never thought that the invasion of the 5th mainland would fail. 2 imprinters even died. The losses are too great. Yeah, the people of the 5th mainland are too cunning. I heard that during the war between the 2 mainlands, the 5th mainland used all sorts of lies to deceive the seniors of the 6th mainland. If not for the seniors' vigilance, the outcome of the war would have been different. Brother Lin, you're back as well? Didn't you participate in the invasion of the 5th mainland's astral beast domain? Someone exclaimed as they entered the 2nd cauldron. Lu Yin opened his eyes. Astral beast domain? The man called Brother Lin was vexed. Don't mention it. If I'd known, I wouldn't have gone. What astral beast domain? That's just a barren wasteland. Not only have the various astronomical phenomena not been cleared out, but the resources haven't been developed either. It's just a place for wild beasts. Did the attack go smoothly? It didn't go well. The resistance we encountered was very tenacious. Those beasts each had their own innate abilities, but they were still able to band together and form a powerful army for the Celestial Beast Empire. Furthermore, they were forced into a passive position in several major battles. I heard that it was because they were divined by something called Skymender. What the hell? What kind of divination is that? The resources they snatched were also very little. Those resources were never exploited by anyone. I heard that it was very tragic. You're quite lucky. The war against the 5th mainland's human domain was extremely tragic. The older generation sacrificed 2 heavenly imprinters. Let's not even talk about the universal imprinters, world imprinters and imprinters. Our younger generation even went to the Dao Source 3 skies, but we still managed to retreat. I didn't expect it to be so tragic. Thank you very much. The mountain breeze for the rest of my life only for you. Thank you, brothers, for your support. Thank you. Calm. Wonderful book house. Chapter 1031. It seemed that the 6th mainland's invasion of the Astral Beast domain was not going as smoothly as they had thought. The Astral Beast domain and the human domain had been at war for countless years, and the Celestial Beast Empire was unfathomable. They had all sorts of powerful astral beasts, academies and various astral beast alliances. It would be strange if they were so easy to conquer. Could be said that conquering the astral beast domain was even more difficult than conquering the human domain. The astronomical phenomena and resources alone were enough to give the 6th mainland a headache. To be able to give birth to progenitor Wuxiang, the astral beast domain's foundation was quite terrifying. The descendant of the imprinter family disappeared. His time was up. Before he left, he even gave the others a warning look. In the blink of an eye, Lu Yin had already been inside the 2nd cauldron for half a month. During this time he had absorbed quite a bit of cauldron qi, and he guessed that he should be able to condense a 2nd sun. However, this was not the right place to experiment. There was still half a month left. After absorbing the cauldron aura for a full month, he was certain that he would be able to condense the 2nd sun. With 2 suns, his battle prowess would soar. Lu Yin was a little excited and he couldn't help but smile. But his smile quickly disappeared. Several disciples of a world imprinter family had chased everyone away, wanting to monopolize this cauldron. Everyone was angry, but they didn't dare say anything. The world imprinter's family was huge and there were many disciples within it. Perhaps these people were waiting for their family's successor. Any successor of a world imprinter family wasn't to be trifled with. Even if they were at the peak of the younger generation in a region, they weren't someone they could fight against. Everyone could only go to the 3rd cauldron. After all, there were 8 cauldrons in total. Lu Yin felt aggrieved. He really wanted to deal with these fellows, but he didn't want to draw attention to himself. Thus he had no choice but to leave the 9 cauldrons space. He didn't dare to absorb the cauldron qi from the 3rd cauldron. Who knew if there would be any problems? He was still a very calm person. He looked back at the 9 cauldrons space inside. It was time for him to develop a few underlings who would specifically help him clean up the trash. Otherwise, he would be disgusted to death if he encountered such a situation every time he came here. There was no need for him to stay in the Nine Cauldrons space. He thought for a moment and continued to head to the Initiation Enlightenment platform. It was time for him to comprehend more lock-breaking knowledge and become a boundless advanced lock-breaker as soon as possible. Then he would be able to comprehend the pages of true insight and comprehend the sourcebox array. A lock-breaker who had comprehended a sourcebox array was terrifying. Lu Yin headed towards the beginning Enlightenment platform, as he wanted to see if he could encounter Maiden Exen. If it had not been for Exen Nu, the outcome of the Cosmic Ocean battlefield would have been uncertain. Exen Nu had helped him block Ziyi and the Sword in the Stone, so he owed her a debt of gratitude. Just as he was about to enter the Enlightenment platform, a figure appeared in front of him from another direction and calmly entered the mist. Lu Yin was startled and he hurriedly turned around to leave. How unlucky. This fellow was a boundless advanced lockbreaker, so it was not surprising that he had come here to dissect. If the Innerverse battlefield wasn't empty, Lu Yin would have dared to fight, but here he decided against it. Amokong was an enlighter and he was also from the Dao Source 3 skies. He even had control over sourcebox arrays. In a fair fight, Lu Yin had to admit that he was no match for Amokong. Fortunately, Bukong did not notice him. Otherwise it would not have been so easy to escape. Lu Yin was at a loss as he started to dissect the stage. He didn't know where to go. Going to the mountain sea for a spin? The chances of encountering a realmling in such a place were extremely high. When he thought about the realmlings, Lu Yin's eyes brimmed with fighting spirit. Perhaps it would not be a bad choice to challenge a realmling to a duel. A realmling was comparable to one of the 10 arbiters, and fighting a realmling would allow one to experience the gap between them and the 10 arbiters. Xing the Death Mystic art had greatly increased his strength, and he guessed that he could rival the 10 arbiters now. However, he still needed to test his strength. Lu Yin decided to take a stroll in the mountain sea, but he did not know the way. After circling around a few times, he still did not reach the mountain sea. Instead, he ended up outside Heaven's Pit. There was a palm imprint in Heaven's Pit that was said to have been left behind by progenitor Qin. Lu Yin had tried to comprehend it, but unfortunately he had not been able to comprehend anything. Lu Yin was not interested in the Heaven's Pit palm imprint, so he turned to leave. Suddenly he felt a gust of wind behind him and he dodged it. He looked up and was surprised. Miss Qing. The person who had appeared behind Lu Yin was Miss Qing, whom he had met in the Cosmic Ocean while exploring the Dao Source Sect's ruins. Miss Qing looked at Lu Yin and smiled brilliantly. You've got guts to come here again. Lu Yin blinked. You know who I am? Miss Qing chuckled. Obviously. Don't you know that Zhitian has issued a bounty for the 6th mainland's younger generation? As long as you're captured in the Dao Source Sect's ruins, the reward will still be valid. Lu Yin was speechless. That can't be. I didn't do anything to her. That's up to you. In any case, she cares a lot about you and she's also very clear about the fact that you were able to enter the Dao Source Sect's ruins. You have quite a few enemies, hee. Miss Qing laughed. He did not need to guess to know that Lu Yin had been able to enter the Dao Source Sect's ruins because of Autumn Frost Qing. That meant that the Tong family might also know that he had crippled Tong Zhan. Putting aside the hatred between the two mainlands, Lu Yin's enemies were spread throughout the Dao Source Sect's ruins. When had he offended so many people? Does Miss Qing also want to capture me in exchange for Ziyi's reward? Lu Yin asked, looking at her warily. Miss Qing shrugged. Not interested. Lu Yin relaxed, as this woman was not as simple as she appeared to be. During the battle in the Cosmic Ocean, he had sensed Miss Qing's strength. Although she had been concealing her strength and had not completely revealed her rune lines, Lu Yin was certain that she would not be any easier to deal with than the realmlings. On the surface, the 6th mainland was composed of the Dao Source 3 skies and the 9 realmlings, but there were also many hidden experts such as Exen Nu and Miss Qing. In reality, this was the case everywhere, and it was the same for the 5th mainland. Was there really no one in the younger generation who could compare to the 10 arbiters? The 3 Dark Hands descendants had not even appeared yet. Lu Yin looked at Miss Qing. Since Miss Qing isn't interested in me, then I'll be leaving. Hold on, you don't want to explore the Dao Source Sect's ruins with me? Miss Qing teased. Lu Yin smiled bitterly. I wouldn't dare. Miss Qing smiled happily. Are you afraid that I'll betray you? Lu Yin thought about it and then shook his head. No, I'm afraid of running into Mr. Bai. Miss Qing rolled her eyes. What are you afraid of? That guy probably won't do anything to you. Haven't you heard? Wu Taibai, one of the Dao Source 3 skies, isn't interested in fighting. He only likes to explore and travel, and he especially likes the Dao Source 6 ruins. No, I don't want to take the risk, Lu Yin said, as he did not like leaving his fate in the hands of others. Miss Qing's mouth twitched. Coward. Lu Yin was about to leave. Miss Qing suddenly thought of something. Right, your fifth mainland isn't simple. Don't think that you're so powerful. Lu Yin paused and turned around in surprise. What do you mean? Miss Qing thought about it. I'm not sure if what I sensed was real or not, but in any case, during the invasion of your fifth mainland, I met two people whose auras came from the same source. Guess what I thought of? What? Progenitor Chen's 9 clones technique, Miss Qing said solemnly. Lu Yin was stunned. That can't be. Someone from the fifth mainland knows the 9 clones technique? Miss Qing hesitated. I'm not sure, but I felt that their auras were exactly the same. I'm very sensitive to other people's auras. Your disguise is actually pretty good, and you might even be able to fool a realmling, but you can't fool me. Those two people gave me the same aura, and it was only when I arrived here that I remembered the 9 clones technique. Who? Lu Yin asked. Miss Qing turned around. Go find them yourself. She then entered Heaven's Pit. Lu Yin blinked. Find them? How was he supposed to find them? It couldn't be one of the 10 arbiters, right? Lu Yin continued to search for the mountain sea. Regardless of whether Miss Qing was telling the truth or not, it had nothing to do with him. There was less than half a month left, and it didn't take long for Lu Yin to find the entrance to the mountain sea. Instead, he found the scripture pavilion. The ancient characters within the scripture pavilion were very attractive to him. Arbiter Xianxia was proficient in the literary prison, so these characters were definitely ancient characters. Lu Yin entered the scripture pavilion. Many ancient characters floated in the air, and many cultivators were sitting on top of them, trying to comprehend something. Lu Yin kept a low profile as he walked past one ancient character after another until he arrived at a corner. He sat down on an ancient character and tried to comprehend it as well. Below the ancient characters was a mountain range and a waterfall. The scenery was pretty good, but many places had been destroyed. Very few people fought here as they were afraid of being trapped by the ancient characters. If that happened, they would only be able to leave when their time was up. Also, these ancient characters might contain the power of their predecessors, and they might not even know how they died. 7th Bro, we're here at the scripture pavilion again. It would be great if you could learn the ancient characters, the monkey sighed. He had also sighed the same way the first time he had been here. Of course, Lu Yin also hoped to learn the ancient characters. The Wen family had a literary prison, and there was more than that here. However, Xianxia had also been able to enter the Dao Source 6 ruins, so it was impossible that he had never been to the scripture pavilion. Compared to Xianxia, Lu Yin was on a completely different level when it came to learning the ancient characters. Lu Yin hoped that no one could learn the ancient characters, as Xianxia would be too terrifying. The ancient characters glowed with a faint golden light. There was no sense of touch, and each character was about a meter long. Lu Yin did not want to learn any battle techniques, but he simply wanted to sense the ancient characters. Aside from Night King Zhenwu, there was another great enemy of the 10 arbiters, and that person was most likely Long He, but it could also be Night King Zhenwu. Naturally, it could also be Xianxia. If he could understand the ancient characters, then he would have an advantage in dealing with Xianxia. However, the possibility of it being Xianxia was relatively low. Xianxia was one of the 10 arbiters whom Lu Yin had interacted with the most, and he must have investigated Lu Yin. If Xianxia was the one who had created the trial with the surname Lu, then he should have been dealt with long ago. People came and went from the scripture pavilion, and some even came here to avoid their enemies. There were no battles here. Lu Yin quietly stayed here for more than 10 days as he pondered over how the ancient characters could trap others. He occasionally gained some insight, but he kept it to himself. When he saw that the time was almost up, Lu Yin decided to give it a try. The ancient characters contained an ancient power, and it was possible that each one of them was hiding something. For example, the cauldron chi within the cauldron. Lu Yin wondered if it could be dispelled through lock breaking. Lu Yin held the giant emperor's third eye in his hand and stared at the ancient characters. He wanted to find a way to unlock them, but even after 2 days of trying he was still unable to find anything. Chapter 1032. Lu Yin was not surprised. If it had been so easy for him to find a way to unlock these ancient characters, then these characters would have disappeared long ago. He was just trying his luck. He stood up and left the scripture pavilion as he would not gain anything here. There was less than a day left, and Lu Yin planned to ask someone how to get to the mountain sea. If he could not absorb the cauldron chi the next time he came, then he would either go to the beginner enlightenment platform or the mountain sea. Aside from the scripture pavilion, the closest place was the budding terrace. Lu Yin arrived at the budding terrace and grabbed a random cultivator from the 6th mainland. "Take me to the mountain sea." The 6th mainland cultivator stared at Lu Yin in astonishment, but then he became furious. "How dare you capture me? Do you know who I am? My senior is the Eastern region's realmling, the Little Arrow Saint. You're courting death." Scram. Lu Yin was astonished. "The Little Arrow Saint? It's good that you know." Fram. The cultivator bellowed. Lu Yin sneered. "I don't care who your senior is. Take me to the mountain sea." Just as he finished speaking, Lu Yin felt a chill run down his back. The void distorted as an arrow pierced through the void and shot towards him. Lu Yin turned around and raised his hand. His 9-lined battle force imprint slapped out with the sky beast claw, and with a bang the arrow was stopped in its tracks and shattered into dust. A shockwave spread out from beneath Lu Yin's feet, and the cultivator who had been captured was sent flying before crashing into the distance and fainting. Lu Yin looked in the direction that the arrow had come from with a grave expression. This power belonged to the Little Arrow Saint. In the distance, the Little Arrow Saint slowly walked over and glanced at the unconscious cultivator. He then looked at Lu Yin and frowned. "You look familiar. Who are you?" Lu Yin had not expected himself to be so unlucky as to run into the Little Arrow Saint by randomly grabbing a random person. However, this was also good. This person had chased him for more than 10 days on the miniature continent, and it was time for him to have a real showdown with him. "I've heard that the Little Arrow Saint's archery skills are unparalleled, so I'm here to experience it," Lu Yin said. The Little Arrow Saint's gaze landed on Lu Yin's hand. 9-lined battle force. "Which region are you from?" "The martial Immortal realm." The Little Arrow Saint raised his eyebrows, and his eyes flashed with battle intent. If the realmlings of the 9 domains were ranked, then the realmlings of the Celestial Martial Domain would at least be in the top 3. The Celestial Martial Domain is just like the Stone Domain in that it has many experts. I didn't believe it before, but now I do. "Cut the crap. Let's fight." Lu Yin's figure flashed as he appeared in front of the Little Arrow Saint. He raised his right fist and imprinted 9-lined battle force onto it as he punched out. This punch was much stronger than when he had fought in the Cosmic Sea. His battle force had risen to 9-lined battle force, and his strength had also increased greatly after he had practiced the arcane art of life and death. The Junior Arrow Saint's eyes widened, and his own 9-lined battle force soared into the sky and imprinted itself onto his longbow. He used it to block Lu Yin's punch, and there was a loud bang as the ground shook and cracked. Countless shattered rocks shot out in all directions, each one containing the might of 9-lined battle force as they tore through the void. There were originally some cultivators on the budding terrace, but the clash between Lu Yin and the Little Arrow Saint had caused a violent gale that swept through the entire terrace. Many of the cultivators were shocked and hurriedly fled. The Little Arrow Saint stared at Lu Yin in shock, as he had almost been unable to withstand the might of Lu Yin's punch. He was a hunter and a realmling, but this person's strength was actually so great. As he thought about it, the Little Arrow Saint drew his bowstring to a full moon, and his star energy transformed into an arrow that was aimed at Lu Yin. He fired an arrow that was even more powerful than the previous one. Lu Yin dodged and pushed the longbow away with a single hand. He spun around in midair and tapped out with a finger. The dream finger caused the void to freeze, and the Little Arrow Saint was caught off guard. The finger pierced through his shoulder, and the aftershocks spread out in a fan shape that shattered the ground. The Little Arrow Saint endured the pain and grabbed onto Lu Yin's arm. Their 9-lined battle force collided, and the longbow was drawn to a full moon once more. This time it was not just one arrow but dozens of arrows. The power of each arrow overlapped, and the void was unable to withstand the pressure. Lu Yin's pupils shrank, but it was too late for him to retract his right hand. His eyes suddenly changed and his pupils became deep and dark. The Day-Night Clan's battle technique, Nightfall. Lu Yin's spiritual force transformed into a curtain of night that covered everything that the little arrow saint could see. The Sixth Mainland's cultivators were already powerful to begin with, and Lu Yin's spiritual force was also extremely powerful. Coupled with the Day-Night Clan's battle technique's perfect eruption, the little arrow saint was unable to withstand Nightfall's attack for a moment. The arrows that he shot flew out in all directions uncontrollably, and only a few managed to strike Lu Yin and injure him. Lu Yin retreated dozens of meters, and his chest felt heavy as a trace of blood flowed out of the corner of his mouth. Every single arrow that the little arrow saint had shot could be overlapped, and their power had increased exponentially. They also contained 9-lined battle force. No matter how tough Lu Yin's body was, his internal organs were still under great pressure and he was slightly injured. The little arrow saint did not have it easy either. Lu Yin's finger had pierced through his shoulder, and Nightfall had caused him to feel dizzy, and he almost lost his footing. The two were separated by 100 meters and looked at each other. They could see the seriousness in each other's eyes. "What's your name?" the little arrow saint asked. He had never thought that a cruiser from the martial immortal realm would be able to fight him to such an extent. Lu Yin's strength was not much weaker than the Riemling's Jian Ru. Lu Yin wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. "I'll tell you if you win." The little arrow saint's eyes narrowed. "Don't you know that I'm from the secret progenitor realm?" As he spoke, the wound on his right shoulder that had been pierced through by the dream finger healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Lu Yin's eyelids twitched. Resurrection techniques were truly disgusting. The sword and the stone and the little arrow saint were both from the secret progenitor realm, and both of them had resurrection techniques. It would be very difficult to defeat them unless they won in a single blow, and this was only their resurrection techniques. There was also the God-fusing technique which had left a deep impression on Lu Yin. During the battle at the Cosmic Sea, neither the sword and the stone nor the little arrow saint had needed to use the God-fusing technique or imprint because their power levels already exceeded 200,000. However, there were no such concerns here, and the little arrow saint could perfectly display his strength and display the strength that a realmling should possess. The little arrow saint gave Lu Yin a similar feeling to Lan Si. Similarly, he did not have any dazzling battle techniques, but he did have a technique that allowed him to stack his arrows to unleash explosive power. This technique could be displayed even under the suppression of astronomical phenomena. Lan Si similarly relied on overlaying stacks. However, compared to Lan Si, the little arrow saint was much more difficult to deal with because he had a secret technique. The existence of the Sixth Mainland's 3 progenitors had given low-level cultivators many opportunities to rise above others. In the blood progenitor realm, one could coincidentally obtain an unparalleled bloodline and immediately become a top-notch expert. Bloodlines surpassed battle techniques and innate gifts. In the martial progenitor realm, as long as one comprehended a martial seal, one's power level would also increase by several times. The secret progenitor realm was the most obvious. The more one comprehended the secret progenitor's inherited secret techniques, the more powerful they would become. Although the little arrow saint was powerful, he might not have been qualified to become a realmling. However, he had comprehended 2 secret techniques, and by relying on his 9-line battle force, he could crush all of his peers in the eastern region and become a realmling. The little arrow saint seemed easy to deal with, but the simpler someone was, the harder it was to deal with them. In front of Lu Yin, dozens of arrows tore through the air. Their trajectories were ever-changing, but they could fuse together at any time to form an indescribably terrifying force that could sweep through everything. The little arrow saint was not fast enough, so his arrows covered a large area. In the face of such an attack, very few cultivators below the realmling level could evade it, and Lu Yin was not one of them. Speed was useless against Lu Yin. Lu Yin weaved through the arrows and quickly approached the little arrow saint. His left palm faced each other from a distance, and his right palm slapped against the back of his left hand. A sharp gale whistled through the air as it rushed towards the little arrow saint. The little arrow saint easily dodged the attack, but his mind was constantly thinking. When had there ever been someone in the martial immortal realm who could challenge a realmling as a cruiser? Suddenly he thought of a rumor that he had heard before. Could it be that rumor was true? Your little Qing? The little arrow saint shouted as he stared at Lu Yin. Lu Yin was confused. Little Qing? Rumor has it that the martial immortal realm's realmling Jianru was defeated by someone called Little Qing several years ago. However, it's only a rumor and has not been confirmed. The martial immortal realm's realmling hasn't been replaced, and you're still a cruiser despite your strength. You must be Little Qing, the little arrow saint said confidently. Lu Yin did not refute him as Little Qing was Little Qing. Rumors really can't be trusted. They say that Little Qing is a woman, but I never expected her to be a man. The little arrow saint shouted as an imprint suddenly appeared behind him. It was a 3-inch-old man, and Lu Yin had seen this imprint on the sword in the stone before. It should be a powerhouse at the secret progenitor realm's celestial imprint level. With the appearance of the imprint, the little arrow saint's power level, which had been infinitely close to that of an enlighter, suddenly increased dramatically. His entire body seemed to grow taller, and the arrows he shot out became even more powerful. Lu Yin's eyes widened, but he was not surprised. Realmlings had imprints that could increase their power level, and the 10 arbiters had always fought against realmlings who were using their full strength. Lu Yin had already been prepared for the little arrow saint to use his imprint during his battle with him. An arrow tore through the air and Lu Yin raised a hand to grab it. His entire body was pushed back by the arrow. He also had 9-lined battle force, but his battle force was on the verge of collapse. The little arrow saint snorted and shot out another arrow. A realmling could not be provoked. He did not know how Jianru had been defeated, but he would not lose. Lu Yin growled and used all of his strength to crush the arrow. Several more arrows appeared in front of him, and the little arrow saint did not give him any time to catch his breath. Lu Yin felt a little sullen as he was afraid of exposing his identity. He had not used any of his secret techniques such as the overlaying stacks path or the 9-yang cauldron transformation, but his opponent was a realmling. He calculated the time and estimated that he would be able to leave the Daoist sect's ruins soon, so it would not be too much of a problem for him to expose himself now. Lu Yin suddenly looked up and gathered star energy in his right hand. A scorching sun blossomed with radiance, and he fiercely swatted it out to meet the incoming arrows. The little arrow saint's pupils shrank. What? There was a boom and the budding terrace shook once again. The cultivators who had wanted to get closer to watch the battle were all blown away. Only 1 or 2 imprinter disciples managed to hold on, but they did not dare to get any closer. Lu Yin had used up 1/3 of his 1 star to display 1 sun, and its power was enough to contend against an enlighter with a power level of over 200,000. The little arrow saint's arrows were about the same level of power, so they were able to cancel each other out. Lu Yin tore through the void and charged towards the little arrow saint who shouted, "You're not Little Qing. You're Lu Yin." Lu Yin did not say a word as he activated Night's Advent. His spiritual force caused the little arrow saint to see the sky darken. The little arrow saint's body was branded with 9-lined battle force, and his longbow shook in all directions. Suddenly the longbow froze and Lu Yin grabbed it with both hands. His overlaying stacks exploded and 100 stacks shot through the longbow towards the little arrow saint. Chapter 1033. Even though the junior arrow saint had 9-lined battle force to defend himself, he was still almost forced to let go of his longbow by the 100 stacks. In the nick of time he pulled back his bowstring and shot an arrow towards Lu Yin's heart. Lu Yin hurriedly activated the secret art to divert the arrow, and the junior arrow saint took advantage of this opportunity to attack Lu Yin with a palm. Lu Yin elbowed the junior arrow saint, and with a bang the two of them pulled apart once more. The junior arrow saint glared at Lu Yin with a look of disbelief. "Impossible. How can you possibly have a power level comparable to mine?" Lu Yin clenched his fists and exhaled in satisfaction. He had just clashed head-on with the junior arrow saint, and he had even displayed his full strength. The junior arrow saint had even used his imprint, which meant that he was strong enough to fight the 10 arbiters head-on. The junior arrow saint could not figure out how Lu Yin had improved so much in such a short period of time. During the battle at the Cosmic Sea, this person had only had 8 lines of battle force, and his strength was not enough to contend against someone with 9 lines of battle force. Furthermore, he had almost stolen the longbow and he did not have a powerful spiritual force battle technique. Even the junior arrow saint had been affected, so how had this person improved so much? The more he thought about it, the more terrifying it became. The junior arrow saint's eyes were filled with killing intent, and he knew that he could not allow this person to live. He raised his longbow and shot out a barrage of arrows. Each arrow contained 9-lined battle force, and they were accompanied by the strength of his imprint. His overlaying technique covered all of Lu Yin's possible escape routes. The little arrow saint attacked with all his might. Lu Yin's eyes blazed with battle intent as he gathered star energy in his right hand. This time it wasn't just a single sun. A second sun slowly condensed behind the first, and it smashed towards the first. Lu Yin used nearly half of his star energy to blast out a sun and shatter one arrow after another. He wanted to use his star energy reserves, which far exceeded the average person's, to make up for the difference in their realms. However, the junior arrow saint was still a realmling and he had quite a bit of star energy as well. His arrows seemed to be endless, and his first sun was quickly consumed, while his second sun was similarly unable to block more than a few arrows. The junior arrow saint had made up his mind to kill Lu Yin with his arrows. He had not hesitated to consume his star energy and expand the range of his attacks to prevent Lu Yin from escaping with his speed. Lu Yin waved his hand and activated the secret art. One of the arrows changed direction and shot towards the junior arrow saint himself. The little arrow saint hurriedly shot out arrows to cancel each other out. What Lu Yin needed was the moment when the two attacks would cancel each other out. Nightfall appeared once more and unleashed a spiritual force attack. At the same time, Nightfall pointed out with a finger. Dream Finger. The three attacks combined into one. Even if the little arrow saint could recover, he would still need at least 1 second. That 1 second was enough. Lu Yin appeared behind the junior archer saint and struck out with 100 stacks 300-fold shockwave palm. Bang! The junior arrow saint felt a sharp pain in his back as the 100 stacks shockwave palm, which was 300 times stronger than normal, descended upon him. Even if he had 9-line battle force, his defenses would still be cracked open. Lu Yin also had his own 9-line battle force, and that, combined with his strength that even enlighters feared, allowed him to send the junior arrow saint flying with a single palm strike. The junior arrow saint spat out blood in midair. The junior arrow saint was not the strongest realmling, and he might not even be ranked in the top 3. As for Night King Zhenwu, he was ranked at the very top of the 10 arbiters. Lu Yin's current strength was still lacking if he wanted to defeat Night King Zhenwu. Aside from increasing his realm, he also needed stronger techniques. However, Lu Yin had the true scripture of Yin evolution to fight against Night King Zhenwu. This was the ruins of the Daoist sect, so he could not use the true scripture of Yin evolution. He could only use it on the 5th mainland. If the previous battle had erupted on the 5th mainland, then his chances of defeating the junior arrow saint would have been very high. The true scripture of Yin evolution was enough to erase the junior arrow saint's strength that had increased through his imprint. The budding terrace, Heaven's Pit, the scripture pavilion, and so on. The junior arrow saint had used his status as a realmling to capture Lu Yin. Coupled with Zi's bounty, all of the cultivators in the 6th mainland had mobilized to search for Lu Yin. Unfortunately, they were destined to never find him. Not long after, the scene in front of Lu Yin changed, and he left the ruins of the Daoist sect and appeared in a secret room in King Zishan's palace. He moved his arm, but fortunately his injuries were not as severe as he had imagined. The technocracy's arcane art of life and death had not only increased his battle force, strength, domain, and even his physical defenses. If he still had the same power level as he had in the Cosmic Sea, that attack just now would have been enough to seriously injure him. He glanced at his gadget and saw that several weaves in the west had joined the Great Eastern Alliance. The main reason was that Myriad City's enthusiastic response had shaken many of the Western weaves' powers. Lu Yin guessed that Wang Wen must have taken action, or else Xianxia would not have responded so enthusiastically to the Great Eastern Alliance. During the month that Lu Yin had been in the ruins of the Daoist sect, nothing major had happened in the Outerverse. Besides the expansion of the Great Eastern Alliance, Wang Wen had also taken many resources from the Outerverse and given them to the 12th Imperial Squadron to create androids. Lu Yin did not object. Right now he was most concerned about Ban Jiu's research on the Neoverse armor. As he thought about it, Lu Yin sent a message to Banjiu. Banjiu did not reply. Lu Yin left King Zishan's palace and arrived at the 12th Imperial Squadron's underground research facility. When they saw Lu Yin arrive, the 12th Imperial Squadron's members hurriedly bowed. Lu Yin waved for them to leave and then went to Banjiu's research facility. He saw that the man was focused on studying the materials that had been prepared, and the blueprint for the armor was displayed on the screen in midair. Lu Yin looked at it. He took a look and then left. Banjiu was still researching and Lu Yin did not want to disturb him. It was time to use the Heaven Fire Stone to cultivate. There were countless cultivation methods in the universe, and there were also countless ways to increase the speed of absorbing star energy. Lu Yin was confident that his star energy absorption speed was unparalleled. Not everyone had a physical body that could withstand extreme heat, and not everyone could obtain a treasure like the Heaven Fire Stone. The factors that had previously restricted Lu Yin from increasing his cultivation realm had been high temperature and star energy, but now both had been resolved. He had been worried that his sudden increase in strength would cause his realm to become unstable, but after his battle with the Little Arrow Saint he no longer needed to worry about this. Lu Yin raised his hand and his die appeared. If he wanted to cultivate, he definitely did not have enough time in the real world, so he could only use the time-stop space. He tapped the die and it spun before finally stopping at 4 pips. His luck was pretty good and the scene in front of him changed and he appeared in the time-stop space. He had extended the time-stop space by half a year, but it had only cost him around 400 star essence. Lu Yin waved his hand and countless star essence appeared. There were at least 1 million of them and he took out the Heaven Fire Stone. He took a deep breath and his 99 stars revolved as he began to cultivate. Time flew by and a month quickly passed by. Lu Yin opened his eyes and saw that he had used up hundreds of thousands of star essence. The space was scorching hot, and the high temperature that had been branded onto his body was still unbearable. A faint roar could be heard from within the Heaven Fire Stone. Lu Yin had been worried that the Heaven Fire Stone would give birth to a fire dragon, which was why he had not continued his cultivation. He waved his hand again and the star essence on the ground increased by another 1 million. He closed his eyes and continued to cultivate. Another month quickly passed by and it wasn't too long before he could break through to the 6th cycle. Lu Yin took a deep breath and 10 days later his body trembled as waves of energy shot out in all directions. He suddenly opened his eyes and clenched his fists. His body emitted a slight rumbling sound as he completed the 6th cycle. He had become a 6-cycle cruiser. As for the star essence, he had used up about 600,000 star essence. If not for this method, then even with the serious technique, it would have taken him 800 years to reach the 6th cycle. The amount of star energy in his body was too ridiculous, and even the 10 arbiters did not have that much star energy. The more star energy one had, the more one could ignore the suppression of realms. Now Lu Yin could ignore the suppression of an enlighter with a power level of over 200,000. He looked at his hands, which had recovered from the battle with the Junior Arrow Saint. It had been more than 6 years since the inner verse and outer verse had been separated. 6 years ago, Lu Yin had needed to rely on external items to deal with enlighters, and the first person he had killed had been Karthika. Now he could kill Karthika without any external items and it had only taken him 6 years. Lu Yin himself felt that his cultivation speed was too fast, but he needed it to be even faster. The Heaven Fire Stone's high temperature was still much higher, and after absorbing the flames that the Dark Phoenix clan had used to seal off their entire clan, Lu Yin estimated that these flames would allow him to reach the 7th cycle. He closed his eyes and continued to cultivate. The scenery changed and when Lu Yin opened his eyes he was back in King Zishan's palace. 1 second had passed in the real world but a year had passed in the time-stop space. In the first half of the year he had used the Heaven Fire Stone's high temperature to cultivate, which had allowed him to reach the 7th cycle cruiser realm. This speed was something that few people in the entire universe could achieve. In the second half of the year he had consolidated his current realm. Chapter 1034. Lu Yin's current physical body, strength, defense, domain and even spiritual force had all grown a little. He had a strange look in his eyes. If he were to fight the Junior Arrow Saint again, the results would be different. If he had fought the Junior Arrow Saint before without the true scripture of Ian evolution, his chances of victory would have been 50% or 40% to 60%, with the Junior Arrow Saint having an extra 10% chance of victory. But now Lu Yin's chances of victory were also 40% to 60%, with him having an extra 10% chance of victory. No, he might even have a 20% chance of winning. If he gathered all his star energy into a single sun, his power level would be enough to make even an enlighter with a power level of 300,000 fear. A cruiser's cultivation cycle did not make much of a difference, but if he broke through to the hunter realm, then there would be a qualitative difference. Even the Dao Source 3 Skies might not be his opponent, let alone the Junior Arrow Saint. Lu Yin was quite confident in his own abilities. He had guessed that he would be able to fight the 10 arbiters once he became a cruiser, and he had done just that. Now he was certain that once he broke through to the hunter realm, he would be able to fight the 3 enlighters from the Dao Source 3 Skies. Although only a second had passed in the real world, Lu Yin had been cultivating in the time-stop space for an entire year, and he was exhausted. He walked out of King Zishan's palace as the sun set in the west. High up in the sky, the 3 rings of land blocked out much of the light, but there was still a trace of afterglow that fell onto the palace. The palace was second only to the Imperial Palace, and Lu Yin looked at the setting sun. He suddenly remembered that he had never seen a sunrise in the palace before, and he looked forward to it. Although his identity as King Zishan's descendant was fake, he had used it for so many years that he had developed feelings for this place. It was his home. He stood at the edge of the palace and looked at the setting sun until it was dark. Then he retracted his gaze and stepped out, tearing through the void to appear outside the tavern. He liked to relax outside of cultivation, and this place was a good place to do so. Tonight, the tavern was especially lively and all the tables were occupied. Lu Yin disguised himself and quietly waited for the other customers to finish eating and leave. "Brother, why don't you come home? There's still an empty table," the owner kindly offered. Lu Yin smiled. "There's no need. I like to drink outside." The owner nodded and did not say anything else. He simply gave Lu Yin a chair and told him to wait. Not long after, a table was emptied out, and as usual there was wine and food. Lu Yin drank and exhaled in a carefree manner. After a year of cultivation, it felt good to occasionally take a break. At this moment, someone at the next table exclaimed, Red female ghost? What? Where's the ghost? Look, there's Red." Lu Yin turned to look into the distance when he heard this, and what he saw was a smear of red and a beautiful face slowly approaching. The customers in the tavern were all scared away. The owner was so scared that his legs were trembling. He looked at the woman in red who was slowly approaching. In the middle of the night, wearing bright red clothes and looking so beautiful, anyone would be afraid. Lu Yin's eyes flashed. Why was this woman here? Lily Rose was one of the top experts of the Blaze Realm's younger generation. Before the inner verse and outer verse had been separated from each other, she had been ranked 31st on the top 100 rankings. The inner verse had been embroiled in war for several years, so it was possible that someone had overtaken her, and it was also possible that someone had died. Her ranking might have risen or fallen. He had only met this woman a few times and he had only spoken to her once. "Have you figured it out now? I want to know who created the Astral River Arc and who can repair it," Lu Yin said calmly as he released Lily Rose. Lily Rose propped herself up on the table as beads of sweat dripped down her face. Her breathing gradually calmed down and her vision gradually became clearer. She could not believe it, as Lu Yin's terrifying strength was beyond her imagination. The difference between them had not been that great in the past, and during the battle on planet Pyrolite, this man had not even been able to defeat Zhongbing Day Knight, who was ranked 55th. But now he was able to crush her. It was not crushing, as she knew that she did not have the ability to resist at all. She did not even know how to resist. She looked up at Lu Yin and then spat out, "Brother Lu, you said that you wouldn't make an example out of me." Lu Yin calmly replied, "I'm asking you a question." Lily Rose was bitter. "Is this the breadth of mind of the Great Eastern Alliance's alliance leader? You won't even let a girl like me off." That means that I only have 1 month to kill him. Starsabil looked up at Lu Yin's image. She still could not divine this person, but she had never expected that he would still be alive. This was a variable. Right, can you also compete for the Star Tower's inheritance? Night King Zhenwu suddenly thought of something and looked at Starsabil. Starsabil nodded. Yes. Night King Zhenwu's eyes flickered. Are you confident? Starsabil shook her head. If I was, I wouldn't have followed you. The Star Tower's inheritance does not represent a single power in the human domain, but rather the entire human domain. The 3 dark hands will also send people to compete for it. With my current strength, I won't be able to beat them. The reason why I'm optimistic about you is because you have a 90% chance of becoming one of the 5 astral children. Night King Zhenwu subconsciously raised his head at this point, as this was his proudest achievement. He was only 8 months away from becoming one of the 5 astral children. 8 months later he would become one of the 5 astral children, and his light would illuminate the universe. His name would not only be known as Arbiter Zhenwu, but also the head of the 10 arbiters, the 5 astral children. Somewhere in the innerverse, Tai Yuanjuan's face was filled with sorrow. He had never thought that Starsabil, whom he had been infatuated with for so long, would actually side with Night King Zhenwu. When he heard this news, his entire being collapsed. When he saw the notification on his gadget, Tai Yuanjun stood up and roared, "Isn't it because he has the highest chance of becoming one of the 5 astral children that you decided to follow him? Fine, I'll definitely think of a way to become one of the 5 astral children and surpass Night King Zhenwu. When the time comes, let's see if you'll follow me. You're mine and only mine." In the same innerverse, thorns covered the ground and filled the heavens. All sorts of poisonous insects crawled on the thorns, and there was also a strange liquid dripping from them that could corrode the void. Within the thorns, a woman opened her eyes. Gather in half a year? There's still time. She then looked outside the thorns. It's been a long time since I've left the Guflow zone. Looks like those enemies have retreated. News of the Star Tower's impending opening spread throughout the innerverse. This had once been a grand occasion for the Neoverse, but now there were people from the innerverse who were also participating in the competition, which had stimulated countless innerverse powers. They all felt that from this moment onward, the entire innerverse would be able to participate in the competition for the Star Tower in the future. This made them even more passionate about nurturing the younger generation. Although many powers did not know what the Star Tower represented, they understood the status of the 5 astral children. If the 10 arbiters could judge the younger generation, then they would be the kings of the younger generation in the innerverse and outerverse. Then, the 5 astral children would be able to suppress the 10 arbiters, and they would be the kings of the younger generation in the entire human domain. They would receive even more support than the 10 arbiters, which gave them a special status. More importantly, the heavens had changed and the 5 astral children had a chance to become progenitors. This was the most important thing. Becoming a progenitor could change everything. After the 6th mainland's invasion, countless people became even more convinced of this fact. The innerverse was excited by the news of the Star Tower, but in the outerverse, the eastern and central weaves remained peaceful. The western weaves, on the other hand, were in chaos. Many of the weaves' leaders had changed hands, and assassinations were happening all the time. The innerverse and outerverse were connected, and the various great powers gradually understood the situation in the outerverse. They had originally planned to use the outerverse resources to expand their power, but now they had been dealt a blow. Now that Lu Yin had unified the outerverse, they could no longer plunder as much as they wanted. This included Shamrock Enterprises, Aurora, and other behemoths in the outerverse. They were similarly shocked, but they did not care too much. Only the Outerverse Lockbreaker Society was furious. The Outerverse Lockbreaker Society's headquarters, Source Peak Planet, had been destroyed and they had even relocated. This was something that the Lockbreaker Society could not accept. The Outerverse Lockbreaker Society's president, Jeffrey, was still in the Neoverse. As long as he returned, he would not let this matter rest. However, Lu Yin was not worried as he had been helping the Lockbreaker Society from start to finish. Furthermore, he had reactivated Saul in order to deal with the Lockbreaker Society and Jeffrey. Of course, if Wei Rong was to be held responsible, then Lu Yin would have to think of something. Right now, the first obstacle he faced was the Day-Night clan. Not long after the signal between the Innerverse and Outerverse was restored, Night King Yuanjing contacted Lu Yin. Lu Yin smiled when he saw Night King Yuanjing's solemn face on the screen. So it's Grandpa Yuanjing. It's been a few months since we last met. Congratulations on being able to survive. Night King Yuanjing's expression was grave as he stared at Lu Yin. Little Yin, I'm not joking with you. Return my Day-Night clan's inheritance stone. This is the most important thing for you right now. Otherwise, once the Innerverse and Outerverse are completely connected, you will not be able to withstand my Day-Night clan's wrath. Even if you manage to unify the Outerverse, it will be useless. You simply do not understand how powerful my Day-Night clan is. Lu Yin was shocked. Even more powerful than the 6th Mainland's Cosmic Imprinter family? That one sentence left Night King Yuanjing speechless. The Day-Night clan currently did not have an expert with a power level of 1,000,000. Even if the 6th Mainland invaded, the Day-Night clan did not have a powerhouse with a power level of 1,000,000. Even if the 6th Mainland invaded, the Day-Night clan did not have a powerhouse with a power level of 1,000,000. Since Lu Yin did not even care about the 6th Mainland's Cosmic Imprinter family, how could he be frightened by the Day-Night clan? Night King Yuanjing lowered his voice. Little Yin, I know that there is a deep misunderstanding between you and my Day-Night clan. I've always done my best to protect you, so don't make a mistake. If you really provoke the Day-Night clan, you won't be able to withstand them. The inheritance stone must be returned. This is the Day-Night clan's bottom line. Lu Yin was helpless. I really don't know why Grandpa Yuanjing is so certain that the inheritance stone is in my hands. Do you have any proof? Night King Yuanjing was so angry that he laughed. Anyone who enters the inheritance corridor will definitely leave behind an image on my Day-Night clan's homeworld. The deeper one's comprehension of battle techniques, the higher the image, the more conspicuous it will be. Little Yin, how conspicuous do you think you are? Lu Yin was speechless. Although he wanted to be humble, he had already felt the Day-Night restoration technique, Night King's body, Night King's finger, and Night King's descent. There's such a function? Lu Yin did not believe it. Night King Yuanjing shook his head. There's no need to hide it. We're certain that the inheritance stone is in your hands. Alright, return it. Otherwise, you'll understand the consequences of angering the Day-Night clan. Lu Yin took a deep breath and his expression changed. Since he had already been discovered, there was no need for him to continue hiding. To the Day-Night clan, learning their battle techniques was a capital offense. Furthermore, Lu Yin's enmity with Night King Zhenwu was as deep as the ocean. Only one of them could live, so there was no need for him to continue hiding. Since the Day-Night clan is certain that the inheritance stone is in my hands, then send someone to retrieve it, Lu Yin said calmly. Night King Yuanjing's gaze turned cold. Little Yin, Grandpa Yuanjing does not wish for you to walk down this path. Throughout the universe's history, those who offend my Day-Night clan have never had a good ending. You can check. Lu Yin raised a hand and clenched his fist. Throughout the universe's history, no one has ever unified the Outerverse. Night King Yuanjing looked at Lu Yin and after a while he sighed. Do we really have to go that far? Lu Yin did not answer. Actually, you can become friends with my Day-Night clan. Night King Yuanjing sighed as he truly felt that it was a pity. Lu Yin was someone who had received Master Yuan's support and had unified the Outerverse. If he could become friends with the Day-Night clan, then the Day-Night clan would benefit greatly. If Lu Yin was willing to submit to the Day-Night clan, then they would be willing to pay an unimaginable price. Night King Zhenwu had become one of the 5 astral children, and Lu Yin had unified the Outerverse. With both sides working together, the Day-Night clan would have influence over more than half of the human domain, and their status would not be any lower than the colossi of the Neoverse. What a pity. Since you insist, then Grandpa Yuanjing has nothing else to say. I wish you good luck. Night King Yuanjing sighed as he looked at Lu Yin. Chapter 1037. He did not ask about Zhou Day-Night's situation. She was Night King Yuanjing's disciple, but she had continued to follow Night King Zhenwu. It was obvious that Night King Yuanjing had abandoned her. Perhaps Night King Yuanjing did not know that Zhou Day Night had comprehended night's end daybreak, but none of this was important. With Night King Zhenwu's current status in the Day-Night clan, he would not be able to touch Night King Yuanjing. He never thought that the fact that he had obtained an inheritance stone would be exposed. These ancient great clans had too deep of a foundation, and the things they possessed were also inconceivable. With the Day-Night clan threatening him, Lu Yin activated his gadget and contacted Wang Wen. He spoke with Wang Wen for more than 2 hours. After ending the call with Wang Wen, he directly contacted Elder Big Drum. Alliance Master Lu, don't worry. Master Yuan has already contacted the Hall of Honor, and they are well aware of your contributions to the Outerverse. Night King Zhenwu's accusation that you are a traitor from the Fifth Mainland has already been dismissed. At the same time, your status in the Hall of Honor has also been confirmed, Elder Big Drum said. Lu Yin relaxed. Thank you, Elder. Thank you, Master Yuan. Elder Big Drum had a strange look in his eyes. I never thought that Alliance Master Lu would encounter something like that in the Innerverse. Lu Yin smiled bitterly. This is what happens when you offend the Day-Night clan. Night King Zhenwu once said that anyone who offends the Day-Night clan will not have a good ending. What arrogance. Elder Big Drum was dissatisfied. No matter what kind of impression he had of Lu Yin had still made great contributions to the Outerverse, and the commander of the Outerverse Allied forces had actually been accused of being a spy from the Fifth Mainland. If this accusation was proven to be true, then Elder Big Drum as well as everyone in the Outerverse including Master Yuan, would become a huge joke. When he saw Elder Big Drum's dissatisfied expression, Lu Yin suddenly thought of something. Elder, may I ask what Night King Zhenwu's position in the Hall of Honor is? The 10 arbiters had all been infected by the Hall of Honor, and their authority came from the organizations behind them as well as from the Hall of Honor's conferment. Otherwise, how could they have the authority to influence the younger generation of the Innerverse and Outerverse? Elder Big Drum shook his head. I'm not sure. I've always been in the Endless Weave, so I don't know much about the Innerverse. However, I do know that there are members of the Day-Night clan in the upper echelons of the Hall of Honor. Lu Yin's expression changed. How does his status compare to Master Yuan's? Elder Big Drum laughed. Of course it can't be compared. That's good. Lu Yin relaxed as he now had Master Yuan as his backer. As long as the person behind Night King Zhenwu did not have a higher status than Master Yuan, then Lu Yin was not afraid of the Hall of Honor. After ending his conversation with Elder Big Drum, Lu Yin chatted with Yu Xianzi and in Xiaohua for a long time before contacting Shiyu. Half a day later he contacted Madame Nailin. He hadn't spoken to Madame Nailin for a long time. Within the screen, Madame Nailin was still as alluring as ever. Out of all the women that Lu Yin had ever met, her incorporeal charm was the greatest, and she was the most alluring to him. What a rare guest. I wonder what instructions Alliance Master Lu of the Great Eastern Alliance has for my daughter? Madame Nailin smiled as she looked at Lu Yin with sparkling eyes. Lu Yin felt awkward. That's not a good word. Ahem, madam, long time no see, Lu Yin said. Madame Nailin chuckled. Yes, long time no see. Ever since Alliance Master Lu's meteoric rise and you took control of the Outerverse, old friends like us no longer dare to contact Alliance Master Lu. We're afraid that others will misunderstand and think that we're trying to curry favor with Alliance Master Lu. Lu Yin smiled bitterly. Madam, don't make fun of me. What Outerverse authority? That was given to me by someone else. Madam, you should know that without the Hall of Honor, I wouldn't have been able to reach my current level no matter how capable I am. Madame Nailin sat on the sofa and crossed one leg, revealing her snow-white skin that dazzled Lu Yin. Alliance Master Lu, that's not right. Before the Sixth Mainland invaded, the Great Eastern Alliance had already made a move on one of the central weaves. Now not only have you unified the Outerverse, but 2 of the 4 major corporations have also submitted to you. One of them doesn't dare to offend Alliance Master Lu, and the other one is me. Seems like Alliance Master Lu has designs on my Nailin family. Lu Yin was helpless. Madam, can't you speak properly? You and I are friends and you're my savior. No matter what, I won't do anything to you. Madame Nailin smiled and raised her wine cup. Then I'll thank Alliance Head Lu here. Cheers. She downed the wine in her cup in one gulp. She licked her red lips and then set down her cup. Alliance Master Lu, are you looking for me for something? Lu Yin's expression was solemn. Nothing important. I just wanted to ask about the relationship between the Sword Sect and the Day-Night clan. Madame Naylan was astonished. Why are you asking about this? Lu Yin shrugged. I received news that someone is planning to attack the Day-Night clan. Madame Naylan's eyes flashed. Who is it? The news isn't confirmed, so I can't tell you. Madame Naylan blinked. The first flow zone where the Sword Sect is located is adjacent to the Day-Night clan's Day-Night flow zone. Even though there's a Astral River tributary arc in between, the two sides rarely come into contact. There are also other smaller flow zones where the two flow zones intersect, and the competition for resources is more intense. Lu Yin nodded. I understand. If the Day-Night clan is in trouble, what will the Sword Sect's stance be? Madame Naylan smiled as she approached the screen and met Lu Yin's gaze. What does Alliance Master Lu hope for the Sword Sect's stance? Lu Yin laughed. I have a grudge with the Day-Night clan, so I naturally hope that the Sword Sect will kick us while we're down. Madame Naylan sighed. Then I'll have to disappoint Alliance Master Lu. Lu Yin raised his brows. What do you mean? Firstly, I don't have the ability to influence the Sword Sect. Secondly, both sides are great powers that can influence the Innerverse, so they can't casually use force. Even if there are conflicts, they'll be under control. Even if the Day-Night clan is in trouble, the Sword Sect won't be able to do anything. The older generation is also worried that the Day-Night clan will kick them while they're down if the Sword Sect is in trouble. This is an unspoken rule. Lu Yin understood. Chapter 1038. On Zenithstar, Lu Yin put down his gadget. He had already done everything he could, and he could not predict the future. 2 days later, Banjio requested an audience with Lu Yin and gave him a list of metals to melt. Some of the metals on the list could not be melted even by the remaining flames of the Heaven Flame Stone. Lu Yin spent a few days melting the remaining metals and handing them over to Banjio, who could only think of ways to replace them with other metals. He also assured Lu Yin that he would be able to create a new set of universal armor within a month. Lu Yin's star energy decline accelerated once again. On this day, Lan Si left seclusion. During the battle at the Astral River Graveyard, Lan Si had been injured while transporting goods, and he had been in seclusion ever since. As soon as he left, he received news that Lu Yin had returned and that the Innerverse and Outerverse were about to be reconnected. Young Master, it's rumored that Lu Yin fought with Night King Zhenwu in the Innerverse and almost died. Night King Zhenwu labeled him as a traitor of the Fifth Mainland, but after the Innerverse and Outerverse reconnected, Master Yuan appeared and the Hall of Honor rejected Night King Zhenwu's accusations. Lu Yin's reputation was restored and he's about to unify the entire Outerverse, Elder Iron said to Lan Si. Lan Si was shocked. Lu Yin fought with Night King Zhenwu? Elder Iron nodded. Apparently he was beaten up badly by Night King Zhenwu. According to the rumors, Night King Zhenwu was certain that Lu Yin would die, but no one knows how he managed to survive. Lan Si looked up into space. How long until the Innerverse and Outerverse reconnect? Elder Iron replied, it should only be a few months. Send a message to Lu Yin. I'll be waiting for him at the Astral River's planet Ping, Lan Si said. He then boarded a spacecraft and left, heading towards the Astral River's border. Elder Iron's eyes blazed, and he immediately sent a message to the Great Eastern Alliance via the Human Domains Network. One of the 10 arbiters, Lan Si, was waiting for Lu Yin at planet Ping. Back at the Outerverse Youth Council's headquarters, East San Dios, the two had agreed to fight before the Astral River reconnected. Both sides had offered great conditions, and now that the Astral River was about to reconnect, it was indeed time for a decisive battle. Elder Iron's message shocked the entire Outerverse, and it quickly spread to the Innerverse. The 10 arbiters were invincible existences amongst the younger generation. There had never been one in the past and there might not be one in the future. This was a specialty of this era, a product of great change. No one knew how monsters like the 10 arbiters had been born, but everyone knew one thing. Among their peers, the 10 arbiters were invincible. No one could shake the 10 arbiters' position. Even if the Neoverse had gathered the Fifth Mainland's most elite existences and the strongest sects, it would still be difficult for them to shake the 10 arbiters' position. The battle between Arbiter Lan Si and Lu Yin had shaken the entire Outerverse. Now more than 2 years had passed and the day of the battle had finally arrived. When the Great Eastern Alliance received the news, countless people felt conflicted. If Lu Yin won his battle with the 10 arbiters, his reputation would rise to a whole new level. But if he lost, his legend would be shattered. For a long time, everyone had known that Lu Yin relied on external items to fight, but no one had publicized this fact. After all, he was still a young man and most of his enemies were enlighters or even envoys. There was no comparison, so even if he used external items, no one would say anything. However, Lan Si and Lu Yin were of the same generation, and losing to someone of the same generation would be a huge blow to Lu Yin's reputation. I once heard White Knight say that Lan Si has never cultivated a battle technique before. The only thing he's focused on is the overlaying stacks path. He guessed that it was to pave the way for a certain battle technique. Lu Yin was puzzled. Is the Spirit Palace saying that the overlaying stacks path is a prerequisite for cultivating a certain battle technique? Wendy Yushan nodded. That might be the case. Many people have challenged Lan Si since he became one of the 10 arbiters, but no one has ever forced him to use anything other than the overlaying stacks path. Not even Xiatian was able to do so. Xiatian challenged Lan Si before? Lu Yin was curious. Xiatian challenged all of the 10 arbiters. Lu Yin was speechless. Just how persistent was she? Aside from the overlaying stacks path and possibly some mysterious technique, Lan Si also has an innate gift. Lu Yin was not surprised. What innate gift? Wendy Yushan shook her head. Lu Yin sighed. You're pressuring me. I don't know anything. Are you trying to intimidate me? Wendy Yushan grew serious. If possible, I don't want you to fight Lan Si. Ever since the 10 arbiters were created, they have never been defeated. No one knows if they've fought each other, but to outsiders, no one has ever defeated them. Not a single one. Lu Yin stretched lazily. Then let me be the first. Wendy Yushan did not say anything else. She watched Lu Yin's spacecraft depart and thought for a moment before heading towards the astral river as well. The moment Lu Yin stepped out of Xenu Star, countless people knew about it, and the news quickly spread throughout the Outerverse. Lu Yin was definitely the most influential person in the Outerverse right now, and his every move was being watched. When news spread that Lu Yin was heading to Ping King Planet, the Outerverse was in an uproar. Everyone knew that Lu Yin had accepted the challenge, and what was about to happen might be the most intense battle of the younger generation. Whether or not the 10 arbiters could continue their undefeated legend, and whether or not Lu Yin could create a new legend would all depend on the battle on Ping King Planet. Countless people headed towards Ping King Planet. The various weaves of the Great Eastern Alliance, including the 4 major corporations Shamrock Enterprises, Aurora Corporation, Mavis Bank, Ironblood Weaves Borders, Southern Weaves Borders, and so on, all gathered towards Ping King Planet. Lu Yin and Lan Si's battle was like a grand occasion for the entire Outerverse. On Xenu Star, Wei Rong looked up at the sky. If it had been him, he definitely would not have accepted the challenge. Lu Yin was about to unify the Outerverse, and his reputation would shake the heavens. If he fought Lan Si at this time, it would be gratifying if he won, but if he lost, then everything that Wei Rong possessed would be challenged. Furthermore, there was also a bet to be made which was not worth it. Perhaps this is where I'm not as good as you, Wei Rong muttered to himself as he looked towards the astral river. On planet Tianmao, at the Amethyst Trading Company's headquarters, a spacecraft was heading towards the astral river. On board were Xianxia and Feng. They wanted to personally witness this battle, not only because it was related to Lu Yin, but also because they wanted to record the details of the battle so that they could compile the information. Battles between the 10 arbiters were too rare. Ever since the 10 arbiters' reputation of being invincible had spread, almost no one had dared to challenge them. Thus no one knew how strong the 10 arbiters were. At this moment they were about to witness it for themselves. Even if Lu Yin's true power level could not compare to Lan Si's, he should still be able to force out a large portion of Lan Si's strength.